Good evening. It's 6:03 on August 23rd, 2021. I call the City of Pico Rivera Council meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Council members, Commissioners Camacho,
Here.
Laura,
Here.
Lutz,
Here.
Dr. Sanchez. Here. Mayor President Elias.
Here. Okay. Councilman Lutz, can you lead us in the invocation?
Yes. Please stand. Heavenly Father, we are assembled here today. May you bless this meeting as we discuss the business at hand, and may you guide us through the proper and correct solutions that have been brought before us today. We pray for the ability to see clearly the directions we will take for the care and for the well-being of our wonderful city of Pico Rivera.
Councilman?
If everyone could please face the flag, place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Mayor, there's no changes at this time.
There's no, okay, so tonight we have special presentations. Our first one is the Economic Development Report.
That is correct. Mayor, City Council, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Gustavo Camacho, council member. We spent a lot of time working on this program in conjunction with the ad hoc. So it's going to be an ongoing effort, but I'll turn it over to Councilmember Camacho.
Could you first explain the ad hoc committee, so then they have a little?
Yeah. So again, thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Basically, during the Economic Development Committee, which I chair, we've been working on developing an economic development plan. Part of that economic development plan is a continuation of the economic recovery and resiliency plan that we began back in 2020 once COVID hit. And this is a continuation of that plan. It's quite extensive. That can't be all be done in one day, so we'll go through it as quick as possible. So I ask my colleagues to, if you can indulge me and Javier in the presentation, and try to cover as much as we can because it'll lead to many other conversations. Again, this presentation is purely informational. It's just a framework that staff and I developed to begin the conversation as to how and where we look to develop through smart growth in strategic areas here in the city of Pico Rivera. What should the future look like based on some challenges coming our way, specifically new legislation from Sacramento as it relates to land use, zoning, just to name a few. There's quite a lot of legislation that has made it much more difficult for us to do what we need to do as a community, provide the services, but more importantly, how do we develop our city in a manner that we think is best for our character, but also with the new laws in Sacramento. The presentation is based on a 2-year, 5-year, and 10-year plan. And part of that idea was because basically in the next 2 years, there's already enough capital improvement projects, for example, that are already forthcoming, that have been planned, that already been, are in the pipeline, basically, and which will then lead us to discussion of a 5-year plan and then a 10-year plan and so forth. Through this discussion and through this meeting with staff, a portal was developed that really gets into the detail as to the 5-year plan and covers 4 major categories that we'll go into today, such as infrastructure development, workforce development, and so forth. And again, it really gets into detail for us to understand what the community, the projects that the community has forthcoming. The community, as a council, will be able to see all these projects as they exist today and ideas that are being planned, but also for the transparency to our residents to see exactly where dollars and investments are being made based on federal, state, and local funding. And again, just a reminder, there's no decisions that have been made here. No decisions will be required at this presentation. It's just the request is just to analyze these ideas, their concepts that will be presented today. So eventually will lead us to, my recommendation would be one-on-one council discussion about these, and also eventually to do this into a study session that we can really dive into this plan, that we can really look at. You know, some images are being used here, but again, they're just there to expand the imagination, not final, not concepts that are, you know, we're looking at, but it, you know, because it's something to keep in mind. And at the end of the day, is a question to ask yourselves, you know, how do we create challenges into opportunities? How do we position the city of Pico Rivera to grow economically in the next the next 2, 5, and 10 years? And so ultimately, though, these set of ideas and plans are not going to be possible without the community engagement. We have to get buy-in from the community to understand what the challenges exist, what challenges are coming, but also, you know, our outreach plan, our engagement with the community is going to be key for us to even entertain any of these ideas. So with that, you know, I'll turn it over to Javier, who has been instrumental in leading this presentation. And I'll start it off by, as you can see, through this economic development plan, these are the 4 major topic areas that we've been discussing. And these topic areas are based on conversations that we've had also as a council related to economic development, infrastructure development, workforce development. And one key thing to highlight in the workforce development that we'll briefly touch in one of the presentations is, been working with board member Carolyn Castillo from Rancho Unified School District, as well as Rio Hondo College, ROP, the trades, and also the Pico Rivera Chamber of Commerce that have been instrumental, that will highlight some of these opportunities, because without a workforce, without a skilled workforce, it's tough to really execute an economic development plan. And lastly, the future plans. What does it look like? Again, based on a 2-year, 5-year, and a 10-year plan. So, Mr. Javier, please.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Honorable Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to present. So just as a follow-up to this, again, one of the primary things to really point out as well is that this overall presentation is really a summation of much of the work that has been taking place already, and in direct partnership with our Department of Public Works, our Community and Economic Development Department, and of course, the City Manager's Office with the leadership from our City Manager. But here is just to provide you an understanding of what we currently have in the pipeline with respect to our capital infrastructure projects that are currently in the works. Again, within that 2-year timeframe, we were really using the year 2020 as the base year by which to develop this plan. So as you can see here, of course, this slide is not necessarily designed for you to see every single project on here, but it's just to kind of outline the scale of projects that we're working on here. All in all, you are looking at about a total of about 50 infrastructure projects that are taking place in different phases, of course, whether that's in design or in construction or near completion, but we have about $172 million worth of projects in the works today as we speak. And of course, over the years, that program will further, will develop further. And then hopefully the idea is that this program would influence some of the decisions that the council would be making in the future. One thing to highlight as well, we also consider parks and recreation projects as part of our infrastructure program as well, which includes many of our facilities, whether it's a senior center, community centers, park facilities, et cetera. So this is just a small subset of the projects that we have completed or are soon to be completed, again, by 2022. This slide here is just to kind of give you an understanding of the type of development that is currently ongoing or being submitted to the city for review to our Community and Economic Development Department. Now, many of the photographs that you see here are proposals that are being submitted to the city, And we specifically selected these particular projects because of the fact that these current sites are actually vacant. Some are even blighted. So the overall intent is to not only bring in new development, but to improve the overall quality of life for the residents of the community. And the way we do that is by employing a series of different tools that we have here at our disposal within the city. As you're probably aware, we are in the process of developing a specific plan for the transit-oriented community surrounding the Gold Line. I'll get into that in just a bit. Of course, land use planning and zoning really goes hand in glove together with our ability to kind of plan out the future and to address some of the major concerns that we've been facing as a result of some state mandates, with whether it's affordable housing, whether it's homelessness, or how to plan resilient economic growth in the city. So these are just some of the tools that we're exploring today. Obviously, this is a short list. The idea is that we would then, after doing more in-depth briefings with individual council members, that we can kind of bring this back for further discussion to determine how and what to prioritize in the future.
And Javier, I just want to highlight this was stated. I mean, whether the bottom projects are approved or not, these are just concepts and proposals. Nonetheless, it's areas that are available for a development. We just added those as a basis. The one above is actually the one at the old Home Depot site, which is actual rendering of what's coming and what's been built as today. But the highlights, again, as you look at these bullet points, all very important, but land use planning and zoning are key to 5-year, 10-year plans as to how we look at the future of the city.
Obviously, the future of the city is going to be dependent largely on the type and quality of jobs that we can produce here in the city. So one of the things that we're looking at is what is the menu of options that we can entertain as a city to build a robust workforce that truly meets the demands of the future. So one of the things that we've talked about is, and I know, Mayor, you've been a stickler on this, about developing a more comprehensive targeted local hire program. That's certainly something that we have been looking at and are going to hopefully bring that back in the near future. But that's, as you'll see, one major component of multiple, of a more comprehensive menu of things that we can also bring to the table. For example, we're also looking at opportunities to improve upon our disadvantaged business enterprise goals as far as our contracting is concerned. So whether we want to set goals for women-owned businesses, Latino-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, whatever that may be, the idea is, again, to bring that back and have a more robust conversation about how we want to establish those goals moving forward. We're also, of course, working with partners throughout the city and beyond throughout the region to explore opportunities for apprenticeship programs, whether it's with the trades, with the universities, the colleges, et cetera. We're also, part of this overall program is exploring new opportunities to advance educational outcomes, whether that's education and trade certifications, whether that's bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, doctorate degrees, whatever that may be. But the overall idea is that we're really taking this approach where we want to start building this into the mindsets as early as the kindergarten level, and that's why the conversations with the school district are so paramount to this effort. On top of that, I know our Department of Community and Economic Development has been working pretty hard to advance some initiatives with respect to how we expand our community development block grant funds, really to support the small business environment here. Clearly, they are the lifeblood of our local economy, so we want to be able to stimulate that growth and that resiliency as much as we possibly can. So we're putting out a grant program. As a matter of fact, one of the items up for discussion today is round 2 of that grant program. So that, again, evidence that we're continuing to build upon these workforce development goals. The future also is going to be dependent largely on where we go as a broader economy. So one of the things that we want to look at is whether or not there's opportunities to bring in new sectors into this economy, whether that's the clean, green economy, the technology-based economy, whatever that may be. But the idea is to really roll out the welcome mat and invite those businesses to come into Pico Rivera. I know, our Community and Economic Development Department is also working closely with partners in the city, the Chamber of Commerce, the school district, et cetera, to host job fairs and to really match employees with employers based on the skill set. So we are in the process of rolling out a survey to our business community to get a better understanding as to what our business community actually needs from the workforce so that we can hopefully provide them with better matches in the future. And then lastly, we're also looking at ways to improve upon the capacity of the nonprofit organizations here in Pico Rivera to overall support what we're trying to achieve here. In many respects, the nonprofit organization world is a breeding ground for talent. And so we obviously want to nurture that. We want to support that to the extent we can, and hopefully build a robust infrastructure for nonprofit organizational growth.
And to add, it's just as was stated, it's a key, all of these components are important for economic growth, but highlighting the apprenticeship program, speaking to the new director, executive director of the trades, there's a final book that identifies all the apprenticeship programs available out there, which is something that we can quickly promote and identify. I think we all support higher education for universities, but we also know that there's opportunity with the apprenticeship programs. But in addition to that, the small business support, as we allocated some funds and provided support, just skill development, upskilling. I mean, there's a lot of employers here in their city who can benefit from upskilling some of their employees, what they currently have. And working actually with Rio Hondo College, Director Garcia is already implementing some of that services that already should have been done, quite frankly. Already, but nonetheless, we've identified businesses, we've identified some programs that they can benefit today, but also looking at future pathways, future opportunities there, which I think is important for us to help and even reduce, hopefully, the unemployment rate here in the city of Pico Rivera.
So that kind of brings us into the next discussion. Really, what are we as a city planning to do within the 5 to the 10-year period? Even though we might have an idea of where we want to be in 2030 or 2035, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to wait until then to start planning it. Really, we need to define what we want to be as a city, who we want to be, the type of organization we want to be now. We need to start that planning process now, and that's largely what we've been doing. So the overall intent is to see whether or not there's opportunities in the community to improve those conditions. And so a couple of things to just kind of highlight here, because as we were essentially providing the necessary analysis to give us a better understanding as to where to dedicate resources. Obviously, we can't dedicate resources to everything under the sun. We have to be strategic. We have to plan accordingly. And this is a high-level summary of the analysis that we completed. But there's a couple of things to be aware of that kind of present a series of opportunities to the city of Pico Rivera. So here, this provides a little bit of regional context. One of the things here in Pico Rivera, we're very blessed to have two rivers that kind of flank the eastern and western boundaries of our community. In my opinion, I think we can do a much better job to leverage that asset and really improve upon our ability to utilize that facility to provide more parks, open recreation space. Throughout the region, you are starting to see that, and you don't have to go much further than the Los Angeles River, where they're doing a series of greenway master planning efforts to really, again, leverage that asset. And so we have the ability to do that with the Rio Hondo and also with the San Gabriel River. So it's just simply a matter of how we do that. And one of the avenues that we've been exploring is a direct partnership with Senator Archuleta's office, who's spearheading Senate Bill 268, which is the bill that would enable us to establish a Parks River District, and also to generate revenue, and of course to then utilize that revenue to create more park space or to maintain and operate that park space as well. But it really gives us an opportunity to really revitalize the rivers and the riverfronts. And therefore, it requires a little bit of rethinking of how we want to position the community along the rivers. Another thing you might be familiar with, back in 2008, LA County passed Measure M, and then again in 2016, we passed Measure M, which really provided a boon for transportation investments in the region. And Locally, it's really more well-known as the Transportation Renaissance, where we're really focusing more on building out railroad infrastructure, transit infrastructure, mass transit infrastructure. So here is just an outline of what the expansion program looks like in the Southeast LA communities, including within Pico Rivera. So as you'll see here, the rail network is soon to expand southeastward. Of course, we have the Gold Line that's expected to be expanded within the next 8 to 10 years, with the station in the heart of the city off Pico Rivera, off of Rosemead Boulevard and Washington. So, of course, that's a $4 billion investment, something we certainly want to leverage to the extent we can, and ultimately build upon that investment that's coming into our community. We also have Rosemead Boulevard that provides a north-south connector that would then connect the West Santa Ana branch, the Green Line, the Foothill Gold Line. And the idea is that maybe we explore a potential bus rapid transit on that corridor, and we'll touch on that in just a little bit. And then with respect to smart and resilient growth, a couple things to be aware of is that the Metropolitan Planning Organization, otherwise known as SCAG, has developed a sustainable communities strategic plan and regional transportation plan that kind of outlines where the federal government and the state government should guide its resources to. And the green zones that you see here are those areas, right? The high quality transit areas where we're anticipating as a state and from the federal level to dedicate resources, to build housing, to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions, and really have a more holistic approach to community and economic development. So based on that preliminary analysis, we've kind of narrowed it down to 5 priority corridors here in Pico Rivera. First and foremost, the river corridors, Rio Hondo and San Gabriel. We also have primary commercial corridors. Again, Washington Boulevard is going to be home to the Gold Line. Rosemead Boulevard is going to be that north-south connector to other major transit lines. And then Whittier Boulevard is really the historic corridor, is our mini version of Route 66 here in Pico Rivera. And so the idea is that we would then, of course, consciously decide to focus our attentions and resources along these corridors so that we can strategically grow. But then at the same time, replicate some of the efforts onto what would then be our secondary commercial corridors, Slauson, Telegraph, Paramount, Beverly as well, which all together would create a pretty comprehensive program of where to address some of the major improvements that we want to see here in the community and the type of growth that we want to see.
And I want to add, the previous slide to that, provides a really good context that at the end of the day, as we all know, we live in a regional economy. So, although we promote our respective borders, what happens in Downey, what happens in Whittier, what happens in Montebello, and throughout the region is key to us. But how do we position ourselves as a city to make sure that we capitalize on this growth? And as those priority corridors were identified, as Javier mentioned, they were identified based on the investment that's going in there, the infrastructure investment, both from our city projects, but also from other like Metro and Gold Line and so forth. So these are key corridors based on investment that's already going on in these areas. Again, we identified them based on such, but again, those are just some priorities at this given time.
So here is, again, the heart of Pico Rivera with respect to kind of the central location, the central core. We do have Washington Boulevard here. As you know, we have the Gold Line that's currently being planned by Metro. Again, it's a $4 billion investment. Then the next big step would be then to determine how to connect that Gold Line station to other major railroads in the region. Again, the West Santa Ana branch, which would be just south of us. And then it presents an opportunity to explore bus rapid transit as that connector. And then the idea of establishing a multimodal hub here at this intersection. Exactly where, obviously to be determined, largely going to be based on some of the outcomes that we'll see in the transit-oriented communities specific plan that's currently in development through our Department of Community and Economic Development. We are currently planning out kind of this yellow zone here, quite a bit of opportunities there, but at the same time, one thing to keep in mind is that that gold line, although it does have, quite a bit of promise, it also has quite a bit of impacts. And that's something to just, eyes wide open to be aware of, because Washington Boulevard from a regional level is also known as a trade corridor, right, for the truck movements here in the region. And as you can see, right south of that yellow zone, we have the core of our industrial zone in the city. And so when you eliminate the ability to move trucks on Washington and on Rosemead Boulevard, it could potentially upend businesses in this community. So we need to think well in advance about how to potentially reposition this part of town to, again, support growth and resilient economic development in the community. So there's opportunities here, especially because of its adjacency to the Rio Hondo, to potentially explore a clean, green tech business sector, otherwise referring to it as the Silicon River District. Plenty of opportunities to explore a wide range of new opportunities here. Again, I did touch on Senate Bill 268, which is spearheaded by Senator Archuleta, which would present opportunities to fund, build, maintain, and operate new park space in the rivers and along the rivers. Now, one thing I will say, this is the corner right there where you see the Wiener Schnitzel. Of course, what I'm about to show is not necessarily something that we are proposing, but it just really to get the conversation started as to where the possibilities are with respect to establishing a downtown district in Pico Rivera, knowing that the Gold Line is going to come right down this corridor. So is this a possibility? I don't know. Maybe. But the overall intent with this presentation is to start the conversation, engage the community, and draw out what they would like to see in the city of Pico Rivera. If it turns out to be something different, so be it. But the overall idea is that we excite the imagination about the possibilities that occur in this corridor.
And one of the one of the many legislative bills that are being introduced, and some have passed, some have, through local representation, have fought against. But really, at the end of the day, it looks it's inevitable, the high-density housing development of the new law that we must follow. Whether we like it or not, it's going to force our hands to allow for development that didn't take place. We have issues with parking. How do you create more dense development is the argument that we make. But ultimately, unfortunately, a lot of the legislators who are introducing these bills are from San Francisco, and basically they want us to, in essence, look at San Francisco. So the question we need to ask ourselves, do we push this housing development into these corridors, hence these buildings, or do we allow the proliferation of development within our residential corridors that you have, single-family, duplex, apartments, and so forth? That is where legislation is pushing us today. So either we act and we figure out how to, develop these corridors and provide the housing that is being asked of us, or we, do the status quo, which is not healthy or good, in my opinion, for the future of the city of Pico Rivera.
On that note, Councilmember, just recently, out of the Assembly Committee, it was Wiener's bill that came out that is going to allow 10 units to be developed in single-family residential zones. They're going to allow local jurisdictions to approve that, but again, to highlight your point, that is the direction the state is kind of moving towards.
And eliminated the parking requirements.
That is correct.
So again, not necessarily a proposal, again, just an opportunity to just kind of feed the creative animal in us. But overall, again, we are developing a transit-oriented, community-specific plan.
Where's the
for-
Wiener Schnitzel?
It's on the top floor
Oh, okay.
with balcony views. Again, this is kind of the current environment. This is looking southbound, southwest of that industrial zone. Again, one of the major challenges that we have as a city, and I've done presentation on this in the past, is really the impacts that we have from the Whittier Narrows Dam. We're losing quite a bit of substantial amount of parks and open recreation space in the city. So is there an opportunity to explore placing new parks, non-traditional parks, open space in the urban core, right? In the form of plazas, paseos, promenades, things like that. So we are going to be exploring all of those options. As you know, land is hard to come by to replace open fields for soccer, for baseball, for things like that. So it really forces our hand to be a lot more creative about where we place new parks, open space in the city. And here, this just presents an opportunity to create more of an exciting, experience-oriented central core that would also then feed into some of the economic goals that we have here as a city.
And if following the retail development over the course of the last few decades, we went, from developing indoor malls to more plazas, promenades, that experience, that outdoor experience. And we see it happening in our neighboring cities, Downey in particular, Whittier as well. We don't have that influx of new land that is being given to us, but now with even more so with the COVID experience, people want to be outdoors. So as we see today, this particular area doesn't mean that tomorrow, 10, 20 years from now, this is something that cannot be envisioned based on proper land use, assuming that was the case, that we move forward.
So again, based on some of the analysis that we were doing originally, we also highlighted the historic Whittier Boulevard corridor as one of those major corridors with prime potential. And based on that, we, of course, identified some boundaries, largely the commercial zones along Whittier Boulevard, to determine whether or not there's opportunities to explore, again, the zoning, the land use planning, multimodal transportation, and accommodating those needs. So we submitted a grant to Caltrans. It was a statewide competitive grant. I'm happy to report that we were awarded a grant. Just last meeting, the council approved the resolution to execute the contracts with Caltrans, so we'll be moving forward with that. One of the cornerstones of that proposal, though, got to say, was exactly what you mentioned earlier, Councilmember, is the outreach with the community, right? Caltrans is looking for local cities to thoroughly engage the community in the decision-making process so that they can dictate and determine what our community is going to look like moving forward. It's not necessarily a top-down approach. They're really looking for more of a grassroots approach when it comes to community outreach and engagement. And this grant will allow us that opportunity to undertake these kinds of discussions in that community forum. So we're also looking at Durfee Avenue. As you know, we have a major grade separation with the railroad currently in construction. But the next stage is what happens at Durfee Avenue once that project is complete? What does Durfee Avenue look like? So we incorporated that as part of the proposal as well, which was funded. So we'll be entertaining various concepts and ideas throughout that planning process. And then it just makes us wonder whether or not there's opportunities for maybe more low-scale, moderate, new development along that corridor. Right, this here is Durfee Avenue. Just at the far end, you have the project that's currently ongoing. Again, not a proposal, just to excite the imagination a little bit. What if Durfee Avenue looked more like this? Right, single-story, two-story, three-story development in the area that's a little bit more lively, a little bit more people-oriented. Or, truthfully, it doesn't necessarily have to look like this at all. It could actually even look more like this. Again, we're not necessarily saying that it should look one way or the other. We're looking to establish a process by which the community can participate in defining what it looks like in the future. Couple more images just to kind of give you a sense of possibilities. So this is the corner, same exact corner of Durfee Avenue looking southwest. Right, whether or not there's opportunities, that's currently, as you know, where the Burlington and the Ross is coming in. But there's an ocean of parking that could be potentially repurposed for new economic development purposes. I mentioned the rivers, the San Gabriel River. This is what you have here on the left side. You start with the north, all working its way down to the south. But as you can see here, there's a lot of potential, a lot of green space, open space that could be revitalized, that could be repurposed, could be restored to maybe more natural habitats. But the overall intent is that we capitalize on these assets so that we can truly create more open recreation space in our community, especially space that would be, tied very well to the hip, if you will, to our downtown districts and our uptown districts, if we as a city decide to move in that direction. One thing I wanted to highlight here, I mean, we as a city have every opportunity to catalyze this kind of development. This here is our public works yard. If you've been there, you probably know that it could do with a facelift. We're not necessarily proposing that we repurpose that facility. Clearly, our teams need somewhere to work. But the overall idea is that it could take on a different face with the facelift. And tie that into some of the goals that we have as part of the SB 268, and maybe update and catalyze some new development along the rivers.
And as was stated, it's, having two riverbeds running parallel to our city. I mean, it's a luxury to have these bike routes that many take advantage of. But at the same time, as we learned, the Whittier Dam Safety Improvement Project has also become an issue that is going to impact the city. And as you wonder, how can that even possible? But it is possible. It is happening. And we just got to look at it from a, through the lens of imagining what the city could look like with the luxury of having two of these riverbeds running through our city.
Right. So again, world of opportunity along the rivers. This one here, I love to show this photograph largely because this kind of helps demonstrate what the world of possibilities can be, especially if the community unifies, comes together to define that. Most people will tell me that I'm not absolute optimist and that I have pie in the sky ideas, but this is a prime example. This is the Los Angeles River looking just north towards the 6th Street Bridge. If you've ever been to downtown recently, you'll know that that entire area is in a major renaissance, right? It's being transformed before our very eyes. And I really, I got to credit our city manager, as a matter of fact, because I know that he was very involved with some of the creative land use planning efforts that were underway at the Arts District. But that was 25 years ago. But it just goes to show that it takes 25 years to get to a point like this. Now, I show this because everything on this photograph is actually in construction today, right? Or not everything is in construction, or at least it's been planned, and they're pursuing the necessary funds. The 6th Street Bridge is in construction. High-speed rail is currently being worked on, especially in its connection to Union Station. Some of those buildings you see in the background have been entitled. And then, of course, the Army Corps of Engineers set a major precedent by adopting Alternative 20, which allows for this kind of revitalization of the inside the riverbanks. So again, just a lot of opportunities. Again, if we just come together, put our imagination hats on, there's an opportunity to explore these things in the future here in Pico Rivera.
And obviously, this is a major funding, a major strategic partnerships. But as was stated, someone could not imagine this could possibly be. And, it took 15 years, something around, to make this happen.
About 20 to 25 years to get to this point.
But it happened. And
it has.
Just, being able to look at the potential opportunities.
So some of the things that I know that our Community and Economic Development Department is currently looking at is ways to beautify the community, whether it's on the district and corridor level, or we're also looking at neighborhood block and building level. But again, some of you have been out to the recent parklet that we put up on Durfee Avenue to kind of catalyze that discussion around what could be in the future. And it's been great. It's generated a lot of momentum, a lot of positive energy, and residents, stakeholders, businesses are now really looking for that next big step. What is the city looking to do next with respect to this kind of advancements in the city? So we're all also looking at ways to improve upon our community art, design, and culture guidelines here so that we can memorialize the history of the city and incorporate that into the future design of our community as well. This is by far my favorite slide. Largely because it provides a sense of understanding. You really can't do all these really nice things above ground until you address everything that's below ground, right? It's all those major utilities. You can't put a 4 or 5 story building unless you have bigger water lines, right? The necessary infrastructure to support that type of development. And if we are going to undertake a comprehensive capital infrastructure program, a discussion that it should be had is whether or not to dedicate those resources and those improvements along these particular corridors so that we can utilize it as a tool to attract that kind of development in the future. So, of course, we have to look at all the subsurface utilities really before we start developing and building above ground or at grade.
And I'd like to add to that really quick. We're actually doing that now on a smaller scale. If you take a look at the hotspot project on Beverly and Rosemead, we actually upsize the water line coming into that property for future development. So that way we can encourage a developer to come in and not incur that additional expense, so we can make a better attractive development to happen there.
And to that point, Mr. City Manager, it's just, it's not an issue of we have to rebuild the entire infrastructure and invest all at once, but do it in that manner, as an example that was provided, as these projects are coming and investment is coming to the infrastructure, we enhance those improvements to make sure that they can potentially attract some economic development. So it doesn't have to necessarily be all at once, which will cost, quite a lot of millions, but it can be done in the way, hence the emphasis on the corridors, and in this case, these particular corridors.
So as exciting as it may be to consider what might be in the future, it really comes down to setting priorities. And of course, subsurface infrastructure and utilities are going to be paramount to accommodate that kind of growth in the future. And this, I just wanted to highlight this. This is the tool that the council member mentioned earlier. Let me just click on this here. This is a tool that we've done as a result of our GIS enterprise that we've established here in the city. We created this tool to help better tell the story when it comes to whether you're a decision maker and you're interested in learning about a particular project or what's going on in a particular part of town, but also with the community so that they have a better understanding and a better way to track what's going on in our city in real time. So we created this tool to kind of give you a sense. We've only identified projects that are either private projects, community plans, infrastructure, parks and recreation, and then we have a tab that kind of puts the entire smorgasbord up there. But we also have broken it down, projects that are slated to be completed within 2 years, within 5 years, and also within 10 years. So the overall idea is that you would then, click on any one of these project cards, you zoom in directly to that particular site, and then soon we're going to be enabling a series of other features where you would click on this particular parcel and it'd give you a series of information regarding what they have planned or what they've submitted for proposal and for permits, and maybe even some historical background. What was there 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago? But the overall idea is that we continue to use this as a tool to inform the decision makers and, of course, the community as well. So I will be sending out a link to the entire council so that you can kind of explore this at your leisure. And of course, I welcome you to go through every single one of these. And if you have any questions, you're certainly welcome to email me or set up a meeting. I'm happy to go over it in further detail. But this kind of provides a little bit more context to what we're trying to do here in the city and the way we're trying to manage these projects as a whole as well.
And we all got calls when the development improvements are taking place at the Home Depot site, and we get calls from the community members as to what's going on. And of course, even us, we approve projects today that won't materialize until maybe a year or 2 years from now, and we lose track of what's happening. And instead of just trying to get a presentation every meeting, this gives the information available to us, but more importantly to the community. They can see what is happening in our city in detail. And this tool right here is just awesome, and for us to incorporate this into the overall plan and be able to understand what's happening, what we can do, and see the city and visualize the city as a whole, I think it just takes us, this tool right here is a game changer for us as it relates to community engagement and transparency of what's happening in the city.
Gabe, can you help me here? I'm trying to click out of this frame here. There you go. Thank you. So again, I'll send out the links so that you can explore this a little bit further. Happy to provide any assistance if necessary, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You just kind of get on there, start clicking away, and it'll give you a better sense as to what we're trying to achieve here. I particularly put this to be continued primarily because, again, as the council member mentioned, there's no decisions to be made today. We're simply reporting out on the conversations, the analysis that we've been undertaking here as a city. But the next step we would hope is that we would have an opportunity to meet with each individual council member to discuss some of these things in further detail, to really give you the opportunity to ask as many questions as you'd like, and hopefully we'd be able to provide you with the necessary answers. And then once we've had an opportunity to brief each and every single one of you individually, the idea is to bring everybody right back, have a more comprehensive discussion as a group through a coordinated work session. And then that way we can start to kind of vet out what might be of, higher priority, lower priority, more important, less important, things like that.
Because if I may, based on the hours and meetings that we had to be able to develop, and I was developing this presentation, there's no way we can incorporate everything. I mean, just the CIP project, the 2-year plan, if you will, it's just very detailed, very comprehensive, and just want to give a surface overview as to these 2 5-year, 10-year concept plans that we can now dive into in more detail and just kind of scratch the surface, but also spark the imagination. Nothing final, some people might get a little bit like, whoa, where are you taking this city? But it's really, how do we position ourselves based on new laws in California as it relates to land use, zoning, and so forth, and how do we take advantage of the location we are with the amount of traffic that travels through our city, with the riverbeds that parallel our city, and where do we look? What is the future of Pico Rivera? And so I think this sparks the opportunity for us to have that discussion. So thank you.
Mr. Hernandez, I also have to, comment on your commitment to this because, again, I've seen you in your mad laboratory creating this, but, it's just not us showing pictures and saying, we hope it looks like this, and, this is the way it looks in our dreams, because I have to say, when I first came into council in 2018, I came in and I asked, at that time, the city manager, I said, I'd like to see your 5-year plan. And she said, we don't do 5-year plans, okay? So you could see the dramatic shift that has occurred here. We not only have 5-year plans, we have strategic plans, we have balanced budget for the last 2 years, and we were again designated by the state of California auditors as a safe.
Fiscal
We're in the
safe.
green.
Yes, sir.
We're one of the few cities around this area that is actually in the green, which means that, our financial situation is strong. So, I don't see this as a pipe dream, because this is something that we've asked, what is the vision for Pico Rivera? And we've been working with it. I have to say that this is the hardest working council, okay, that I've ever had the opportunity of working with. And again, they do put in the hours, and they put in, the time and everything that they have. So just let me assure you that as long as this council is there, we'll be approaching that situation. And I think the only other comment that I have is that I was looking at a portfolio of contractors and developers and so on, and I was just a little bit taken because they had Pico Rivera, okay, Pico Rivera, because of its location, as the ideal logistical center, okay? The ideal logistical center. Now, Mr. Hernandez, what does that mean to you?
When I think of that, I think of access to freeways, access to local surrounding communities, the ability to get in and out quickly of this particular area. I also see the ability for expansion and growth for those types of businesses, logistics type businesses. I also think of the Amazons, right? Whether or not there's opportunities to create more jobs in this city, but then at the same time, that also leads me to think about some of the economic development goals. Some of the workforce development goals that we want to establish as a city. So if we are going to become a logistics hub, it's not a bad idea. We just want to make sure that we can drive that conversation.
Councilman, any comments?
Well, I know a lot of developers, when they look at the city, they see it as a gem. Whether it's the north part, you have access to the freeways, or the south part, you have access to the freeways. And when I think about developers, I think of housing for ownership. And I think it'd be a great opportunity for us to be wise in deciding as a council and picking appropriate developments that are long-lasting and are well-deserving into the future that, say, 10, 15 years from now, our city's going to be in a better position. And what I'm referring to is apartments versus for ownership housing. A community that typically has housing for ownership will typically have a lot more income generated for the city, and it's long-term, the city will look aesthetically better. And so that's my viewpoint, and I cherish this city, and I want to make sure that the decisions that we make collectively as a council and our dream team staff, because I really do believe our staff is a dream team, our decisions that we make now in these next 5 to 6 years determine the future of the city in the next 20. And I'm willing to make the commitment with all of you.
Over time?
Thank you, Javier. This was great. And I know you're a visionary, and I love these ideas. I really do. I do think that we have to also look to protect our residents in our neighborhood. So as we know, if we are growing and we have more residents, we could potentially be creating more traffic, more air pollution. We also need to look into the businesses that we are bringing in. There are residents that may dislike Amazon or the Walmart, the non-union businesses. So we do need to protect our beautiful gem from predators, so to speak, that might want to strap our resources and pollute our land, pollute our air, and once again leave us to fix the problems ourselves. So I think that's just where I caution that we want to grow, but we also want to keep an eye out and make sure we protect our residents.
Councilman Lara?
First, I want to thank Councilmember Gustavo Camacho for putting in this time. You could tell that you spent a lot of time and effort in this. Thank you for bringing this to council, along with Mr. Javier Hernandez. Thank you. We've had plenty of these discussions before. And thank you for the vision that you bring and just the passion that you bring along with it. What I really appreciate about Mr. Hernandez is he's not just looking for development or for building high rises, but he's an avid biker. So he's always looking to incorporate nature with our community. And I think we all got a glimpse of that with the bike ride program. That was just an absolute success. So for me personally, I definitely want to see us redevelop these spreading ground areas. I think these are huge minefields that we have yet to tap into. We need to make sure they're secure. We need to make sure they're accessible. We need to potentially put exercise stations throughout so people can run or walk and then exercise along the way. We need to try to incorporate Lake. That divide between the dam and the 60 freeway, we need to do something that incorporates the city of Pico Rivera with that. Whether it's having a continuous bike lane that goes there, we need to make sure that we're part of that. And we need to take care of our medians and trash, because people drive through the heart of Pico Rivera, they drive through Rosemead, and they see dirt. And we need to make sure that we have the proper infrastructure in place, that those medians look clean, that our streets look clean. I know we're redoing Rosemead, because that makes a big difference to people asking themselves, do they want to live here? Lastly, We need to continue to engage the school district. We need to make sure that these schools are top-notch. And I get it, I don't sit on the school board, but we need to engage them and we need to make sure that they have what they need. And then the public needs to be aware that we're working together, that our goals are aligned. Thank you.
If I may, glad to hear all the comments and, in our ongoing discussion, more detailed discussion is going to be able to develop this. And so from promoting home ownership versus apartments is key. Pollution already exists in our city through the major corridors that go through our city and the freeways. But how do we turn that into an opportunity? That's the key question. And to make sure that we protect our residents, but also turn that into an opportunity. And, again, looking at 10, 20 years from now, this is where we lay this framework. This is the strategic planning that takes place because we got to take care of today. As was stated, the mediums are key, very important, that self-pride in our community. Whether there's watering restrictions or not, we got to figure out how do we beautify our city. But that's in the next 2 years that we'll get into discussion. But the future of the city is going to be developed with proper strategic planning, developing a framework. So once we're all gone, both council and staff, there's something to be followed along the way. So look forward to the ongoing conversation with you all and moving this forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next presentation, commercial cannabis and commercial cannabis ordinances.
Yes, Mayor, City Council, this was a conversation that was requested by Councilmember Lara some time ago. So we have Community Economic Development working on this, and we also have our consultant in the crowd, HDL. Mike, I don't know if you want to make the introduction?
Yes, I'd like to introduce David McPherson, Compliance Director for Hinderleiter Delamas. He comes to us from a company, Hinderleiter Delamas, or HDL, that does a lot of work for the city, not only on business license, sales tax, revenue and reporting, property tax, but they're also experts, I must say, working with many cities throughout California on working on cannabis. So I'll let David go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. And we got a fairly quick presentation to go to, and then we're ready for questions as well. So as staff has indicated, we only work for government, over 500 cities and counties in California. We've been involved with cannabis-related activities for over 200 clients of cities and counties in the last 6 years. Just a recap of what you were in the state on Prop 64, which is just a point in time at 56%. You can see that the county of LA was a little higher than that, and then the city was a little bit lower, more consistently close to statewide. I also want to share with that in mind is that was a point in time, and so where some cities have changed that opposed it, and I use an example of Imperial County where there's 6 cities in one county that had a 48% or lower in position of supporting Prop 64, that 4 of those cities and the county now have cannabis-related programs just because of the state laws and some of the issues that they've moved forward on. So just kind of a visual of the different activities, not to go into detail of this at the time. I think that you would have a little more exposure to this over time. But just the different categories of the chain of through the transition of the process. You can see where cultivation, manufacture, and distribution is really the wholesale side of that. That means it's not to end users. Sometimes people get confused with distribution as being a delivery component. It's not. It's really just someone moving the product to the retailer. It is not moving it to the end user. The retailer, though, has 2 different components, either retail storefront, which is where it's walk-in traffic, or a non-storefront where there's no traffic. So it gives options to those that do not want walk-in retail but still have delivery in their communities. At this point in time, earlier in this month, we pulled down the data regarding what's out there. As you can see, cultivation is significant in numbers, and there's been articles out just this week about the oversaturation of that. And so there is not as much demand for the cultivation side of it, just to that. And then the failure rate for that is high as well, which I'll mention in a second. And then the manufacturing is the next total numbers. There's still opportunities for that because a whole lot of product that goes in that up and down the state. And the key element is the retail. And I'm going to discuss that when we get into the divide of two policy issues. And then you can see the rest of the permit that total up here. There has been initially 4 or 5 years ago, we had 16,000 licenses when we called temporary or provisionals. So you can see the failure rate on some of these businesses that could not be sustainable or get through a process both at the local and state level has transitioned to where we are today and going into a lot of challenges as a business operation for those that thought they can get it. It's not for everybody. Then as we talk about the policies a little bit, sharing just kind of a path to that component for those that wish to consider that as you are today, getting a little educated and having conversations. And I know this is not the first time you had that conversations, but as your item before this about just communicating with others, be it the Chamber of Commerce, being at your communities throughout your city, and all the other stakeholders that are involved of getting input for any conversation, of discussion of where you are, where you want to go with this. And that's part of the collaboration with that and also with your surrounding cities as well. And then, where you are in a legislatively, that's the regulatory, either status quo, where you are on a ban or any consideration with that. And the last step is obviously then what steps you would take if there was some consideration. And why there be consideration is it's kind of just a checkpoint in time. Regulations at the state level have kind of smoothed out a little bit. There's very little things left of that. We just saw the last one where the consolidation of the 3 state agencies into one. The regulations are very calm. The only 2 ones that we're dealing with, I think, from the local level is billboards. There's a couple of bills that are out there relating to billboard advertising, and the other one is deliveries where you have full control of that. And now that's changed over from some of the court decisions of what that is. The last court decision associated with that talked about that if you choose to ban it, the state is not going to assist you on enforcing anything. If you choose to allow it, then they will help you and assist you regarding any enforcement of that component. We've seen consumer trends change in the last 6 years. 10 years ago, we had about a 6% medicinal use and adult use. With that, medicinal went up to 13%, and today the average is 18 to 22% of consumer using it. And it's not all the THC component. 40% of users are using CBD of some component to get off prescription drugs, over-the-counter drugs, and just exploring with this for some of their ailments. Businesses are looking for places to go. They may have already reached out to you, as they are probably some other cities around you as well. And then just a kind of point in time of you looking at it of where you want to be, either stay your status quo or address some different direction. This is really the key element of looking at it. As I share with you from the saturation component, you really have 2 policy discussions, I think, that you should look at in a vertical lane. One is the consumer demand in your community. As long as that there's a demand, you have an industry, be it lawful or unlawful. People are deliveries are coming into town as it is now, so you can talk about how you want to address that, either allowing that, continue the ban on that, which is difficult to enforce, or consideration of having some level of retail in your community. That is one vertical line, which is completely different from the other side in some respect, and that is on the wholesale side is the cultivation, the manufacture and distribution of an interest of that for other reasons, which is more economic in creating jobs and filling inventory of properties in your community. So core values of consideration, this seems to be the common theme throughout the state when we do presentations and talk to councils, is that it comes really back down to the public safety, environmental, the land use component, and access to youth and how you protect all that. And usually decisions are made around these 4 core values, be it considering if you stick with the ban or if you consider some kind of level of regulatory activity. It still focuses on these things for most communities along with other input from other issues, but these seem to be the prevailing themes throughout the last 6 to 7 years. And why is that? In dealing with that, it's the time, place, and manner, just like you would do with any other regulatory, be it a cafe, a restaurant, a bar, or a nightclub, massage parlors, anything of that nature. It's really looking at anything that you may allow in your community, of looking at the time, place, and manner of controlling that. And as you saw in Prop 64, you have the local control to address those issues and make those decisions of how you do it as well. Just a reminder for those who aren't as familiar is when you kind of the decision tree has to do with sensitive buffers. Sensitive buffers have to do with K through 12 schools, both private and public, youth facilities, and commercial daycares. Those are the three state-required ones as a minimum. We show this diagram more for the purpose of illustrating the buffers that can be done. The state default buffer is 600 feet. The way the law is written, it says 600 feet or as determined by the local jurisdiction. So you can go out or you can go in. In this example here, where you have limited industrial area that you were looking in this scenario that was used at one point, is the city was looking at how do we bring that outer ring at 600 feet in to identify more potential properties because they were very restricted. I use this example, you can do the opposite where you can go 600 feet, 800 feet, and 1,000 feet to extend it in the opposite direction. And you also don't have to use the same distance for all categories. For example, you wanted to say, well, I want it farther away from high schools for any activity. You can say high schools, K through 12, I want it 1,000 feet away. But for daycare, we're less concerned about that because it's not exposed to the people that were as well as concerned because we're talking about, young people at the point where they don't understand the dynamics of that. You may reduce that to 200 feet or 600 feet, although you may want it farther from youth facilities and you may want a different distance from that. So you have the ability to do that on all three of those components. So addressing some of the public safeties, any kind of activity that has been done through the state, the priority has always been is have some kind of robust system in the place for oversight. Again, local control to you, making sure you meet all the requirements that are not only best practices, but to meet your needs and concerns that are addressed, and also to address anything that would expose you to concerns at the federal level. And some of those are just examples of that or best practices, or on this slide regarding limiting the numbers, take baby steps to address that, having the kind of controls in place, policies regarding backgrounds, ability to reporting requirements, investigation or ability to inspect, good neighbor policies and mitigating any challenge or logistics and being able to take action against anyone for not compliance to that. And these are just minimums. Criteria of best practices. And so some of the issues that have come about, what kind of potential is there? So the first part to talk about is always a confusion is, well, then if we raise all this revenue, we're just going to be paying for a program and, paying into it. And that's not the case. Just like any other program you have, if you have parks and recs or you have water or anything of that nature, is that there's fees that are cost recovery fees associated with that. From initial applications, ongoing regulatory, or anything that there would be a cost associated with it, it could be passed through to the applicants to make you whole for anything you would want to do for that. On the other side, you have a potential for a tax or other revenues. In some cases where you want to consider looking at a tax, strategically of timing, you're in a good spot because of the tax measure, or the next one would be 2022, of looking at it from a tax. There are cities that have looked at it from funding it from an operation or a community benefits agreement. Some also do development agreements, which is a little more difficult as far as time consuming, but those are options for you to generate the revenues potentially that you may want to be considering. We then took a scenario of roughly your population 60,000 plus there. And just kind of use you as an example. This is not for the purposes of trying to encourage you or tell you this is what it is. We just basically took the potential very conservative for every 20,000 if you had 3 retailers from the front component of this and just use this for illustration purposes. So if you looked at some kind of tax or fee, a community benefit fee, you can see some of the scenarios here that would reflect a 4%, a 5%, and 6%. And then also we added the 1% Bradley-Burns Act as part of that, so you can see what the potential is there. And we did some comps for the LA County and what the retailers are currently doing and what the mean and the averages are associated with those, and to reflect this. So looking at it from a policy option look, just as a discussion purposes, do you want to maintain a ban and be status quo? And what does that mean, or the impacts to that as you address this? Or do you want to regulate that and continue pursuing, look at some options in your community? Option 2 would be medical or non-medical. If this was a conversation 3 years ago, you know, defining it medical versus non-medical was something that was commonly done just as the baby steps to address just people needing it for medical purposes. But from a business model, businesses aren't as open to address only medical because it limits their ability to market their product. For example, if you're a retailer and you can only do medical, then all the deliveries would come in town that you can't stop doing adult use. So it's counterproductive of doing that. And then also how they would market themselves and get their return on their money for making an investment in your community. What kind of license type? As we shared earlier, retail, the different types of retail, the storefront versus the non-storefront, and how you would approach that and why you would do that, versus the non-retail, again, the wholesale type of activities, why you would go that route to address some of the purposes and policy decision you made as we gave you that policy tree of the incentives for the different types of options there. Putting a cap on something, trying to take baby steps and addressing it where you want to take a very slow approach to that. You don't know how it's going to impact your staff. You don't know how it's going to impact your community. You want to be able to maybe have some type of activity here and evaluate it and expand based on that without having a significant impact versus a no cap. You don't have that as much of control of that. You don't know how it's going to affect your buffers or other businesses that might be left out when they try to go and rent a property because it's more value to the property owners when there's cannabis businesses that want to come in there. So those are things to address on both those, on this policy issue. What kind of activity to bring the businesses in? Or, you know, you probably have heard a lot of stories regarding the litigation or appeals or challenges or the impacts to cities related to that. And each one of these types of processes have their pros and cons that can be discussed at a future date should there be consideration for that. But there are different ways to approach it and why, and some of the decisions you may or may not make may have a determination on that. The buffer requirements we shared, but again, here's just kind of reiterating to capture those. What is local, what is state, but also some considerations that you may add as you get input if you decide to do something that's not a state mandate. There's things that you may want to add differently, like like libraries or rehab centers or other sensitive uses that you as a community consider sensitive uses to bring into there. And then, you know, if you want to have separation between the businesses, so you don't create any greenbouts, especially for the retail side of it. And then the distances, as we kind of shared on that illustration of the circle ring, do you want to go less than 600 feet? Do you want to go with the state buffers, or do you have greater than that? And of course, for each one of the different ones tied to that in that other illustration that we talked about. And then where does it zone? We just provided a couple examples of your locations of different zones that you address. If you want it in some zones, do you want to do overlays? Do you want to not have it in certain zones? We clearly did not show anything that would be residential or some of the sensitive issues regarding a residential side or parks or open land type thing, but these are your common areas that you would be consideration of zoning if in any of these. And then what types of fees that you go? Again, in the one slide we talked about, do you want to go tax or do you want to go fees? How would you recover some of these things? These are just different checklists of things to consider that as a policy discussion and an option to consider. And with that, that is just a quick overview of the key highlighted areas. And at this time, I will pass it down to staff for further discussion. We're happy to answer any questions as well.
Well, let me begin. I'm not a big supporter of cannabis, but we have to finance Mr. Hernandez's dream. Mr. Hernandez, being in the location that we are, as all the developers are saying, we're the central logistics center. Is it possible that we could become the next Amazon of cannabis?
Careful.
I'm not sure if I want to answer that. I think anything is
Well,
possible.
I could ask him, and then you could,
I mean, sure, it's possible, but is that what this community wants? That's the question. Is that what the community wants? I don't think that's necessarily a question for staff to answer as much as it would be a question for the community to answer. It's probably not necessarily the answer.
is it a
you're-
valid question to ask the community?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Sir?
Yes, Mayor. So, I just a little background on me. So I was the first person in the country to tax and regulate the industry when I worked for the city of Oakland. It was not made from a revenue perspective. It was regarding addressing the key issues. I think it's important as policymakers to evaluate it of the policy issues, right? Do we have it in our community already or not? Do we see an opportunity where we want to take those baby steps because we have inventory of property that we're not sure if we're going to fill, especially with a COVID situation? You're losing retail that struggled. You're losing industrial business that's struggling. Is there opportunity there? Is it going to impact our community? What does it do to public safety? I think it's important as policymakers to address the issues that we pulled up on that one slide of why you would make policy decisions. And I think and as well, the buffers and the zoning. I think making it from that perspective and letting the policy drive the potential for revenue and not the revenue drive the policy decision. And I think that's important because then that finds that balance in, because what happens if the revenue never comes and now you've got the businesses, right? How much of that from a policy standpoint do you want to find that balance or consideration? And I think in the end, if those good decisions are made on that, the right players will come to your community, the right number that you select your communities can be satisfied with, and then you can identify the opportunity. But you did mention something about the corridor, right? You're in a key area. From a strategic standpoint, it's a valuable corridor location and opportunity for you. And that is something that could drive the opportunity. But I still believe that it's from a policy standpoint is critical in making that decision, because once you ring that bell, you can't unring it. And you learn from some of the lessons learned from others that looked at it from a different way and have those challenges.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, thank you. I have two comments. Number one, I feel that we definitely need to gauge this and let residents chime in. In our, we had a cannabis ad hoc. Perhaps we engage a school board member or someone from the school, a parent, as well as our faith-based community, other business owners. We have several other manufacturing companies, restaurant owners. So I think we need to engage other community members in this dialogue and see how they feel about it. Secondly, you didn't mention anything about the financial aspect. I know that cannabis is still federally illegal, and one of my concerns is that cannabis business cannot use federally insured banks. And so I feel that's a greater risk for fraud or even theft if they're dealing cash only, if they're going to have to use banks that are not insured, private banks. I know that that's an issue as well that could bring problems to our city and also an issue that we would have to deal with. So if you could address that a little bit, and what are some of the struggles that other cities are going through in terms of that?
Sure. We're happy to, Vice Mayor. So first of all, it's kind of a myth that the federal, they can't do bank. They can bank. It just has more restriction of oversight for compliance for that and the SARS requirements and FinCEN law. There are, as you saw, almost 8,000 businesses in California. The CDFA, and we do quarterly meetings with them, has indicated in the last 3 years that they've been taking cash in, that they used to have 8 out of 10 businesses pay their bills by cash. Today, they have 3 out of 10. That means they got more banking opportunities for them. We, as HDL, and on behalf of our clients, cities, and counties, oversee almost 1,800 businesses, and where those that do high volume of cash, we have had no problems of oversight from an auditing standpoint, a compliance standpoint, or security standpoint in dealing with those businesses. They're slowly evolving to try to get to the bank, and I think as we move forward at the federal level, we're seeing more activities, and they all can bank, then we're going to be in a better position. But from a risk factor or concern, being involved from this side, from a regulatory side for the last 7 years, and I took in millions of dollars when I was in Oakland, we do not have any problems from a legal standpoint. The businesses that follow best security practices and the high level of oversight that the cities have for them.
One more question, if I may. I know that medicinal cannabis was actually approved by voters earlier, right, in 1996. So what would the city be able to, we would not be able to tax, correct, at a higher rate, let's say if we were to select only medicinal retail or manufacturing or what have you for that purpose? Is there a restriction in terms of taxing that we could put on those sales?
Yeah, so that's kind of a misnomer too. So Prop 64 said those that have a state card from the state would be exempt from sales tax, not from a city tax. And back when that happened, less than 3% of the people had a state recommend or a county recommendation card. Most of them, a state issued through the county card. Everyone had a doctor's recommendation. So less than 1% of people in the state had that in the last 2 years, and probably less than 1/10 of 1% have that. So it's almost de minimis as far as who can even be taxed on sales tax these days, let alone the city tax, which is not subject to that exemption.
Member Camacho?
It's just expanding on the financial requirements compliance is one thing that is not a misnomer, is that the State Board of Equalization has trouble even making sure that current retail businesses pay 100% of their sales tax. It happens, it's been happening for a while, it happens today. Quite frankly, the story out there goes that 50%, if not more, is not reported. If State Board of Equalization, who handles sales tax, is having trouble today with current retailers, how do they comply with cannabis businesses?
So you're saying in general, the CDFA is having problems with businesses in general?
In general,
or-
general
in
retail
general,
businesses today, the State Board of Equalization has trouble collecting 100% of their sales tax, the receipts based on how they conduct their businesses. So what measures are cannabis retail businesses taking to make sure that the city is getting 100%, and of course, the state, of those revenues?
Sure. So, council members, so as I mentioned earlier, HDL on behalf, as you are a client of ours for sales tax, we oversee 1,800 cannabis businesses in California in behalf of our clients that we do audits and compliance. We go in and actually do monthly or quarterly compliance checks and check their systems, but we also do full financial audits on them annually. So where we do have those deficiencies and they do occur, then we find the liabilities and advise the business in the client city, here's the liability, and then the businesses pay those liabilities, or they don't get their permit renewed on an annual basis.
But how do you measure, in detail, and I'm curious, because how do you go in there and measure that the product that's coming in is truly the product that you're auditing, the complete product that's coming in? And if they're saying, they're reporting to you, pick a number, 100 pounds are coming in, but in essence, it's really 120 pounds, how do you measure the accuracy of that?
There's a few ways that we do it. First of all, we got former FBI forensic accountants, fraud examiners. We have security people that have been doing this for a significant amount of time, that I don't care if you bury the money in the dirt or a product for inversion or diversion of that product. So inversion means you take it from the illegal market and try to bring it in so you don't have to account for it. And diverting it means I grow it or have it in and I don't put it in the legal market, I put it out in the back doors. So we have ways to identify all that, components of that, when it doesn't match all the touching points that we look at. You might be able to, falsify or artificially modify one, but there's too many touching points that we look at. That would be a longer conversation. I'm more than happy to share with you privately, but we do look at it.
And I asked the question only because, again, I'm familiar working with the business community that exists today. And we want to make sure that if we were to move forward, that we're capitalizing 100% of what's going on. And I've known the State Board of Equalization, for those who are in violation, actually stand there, sit there and see the actual, receipts coming in and out as part of their measures as well from the State Board of Equalization. I work with the State Board of Equalization a lot, so very familiar with their operations and those that represent that. But, we come a long way. I know from the last time you presented, I was here, been several years now. A lot has changed, even from your response to the financial aspects of the banking industry. And I'm glad that we chose not to go that route the last few years when you presented to us, because I was one of the people that did not agree that it was something that our community should have. Now, whether we choose to move forward, I agree the community engagement, it's up to the community, whether something of this nature takes place or moves forward. But, I think one of the questions to also ask is not only from a revenue-driven policy, but also is do we want the city of Pico Rivera to be characterized as a cannabis city? Because that's a image in itself as we look to the future of this community, let alone the potential revenue that it can generate to us. So thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Member Lara.
Thank you. Just real briefly, I think the community spoke a number of years ago with the majority of them voting in favor of Proposition 64. So if you wanted a prima facie temperature check of where the community stands, I think that would be a good starting point. My suspicion is that that would be much higher today, just given the way public attitudes and sentiments have shifted greatly regarding cannabis and recreational use. My questions have to do with crime. Have the communities that you service noticed an increase in the level of crime when they allow retail of cannabis?
We have not seen that in the increase in crime. In some cases, there has been stories about the improvement around the properties of that, right? Because they will have security out in parking lots, they'll be roaming, they'll have multiple cameras on there. People are reluctant to do things around them, probably within a half mile. It doesn't mean anything beyond that. But I think there's that proper oversight. I think when you survey law enforcement agencies, the ASSAT and other, chiefs have been doing that. In some cases, the sheriff's department as well in their jurisdiction is ask those questions to their colleagues. And I think that's an important thing for, fact-finding as well, that there has seen some positive. In fact, they've used some of the surveillance crime information or reporting to find other crimes that are not related to cannabis.
I'd like to touch and ask about the aesthetic of these places. When I drive from Pico Rivera to my place of work in Whittier, I go down Whittier into this small sliver of unincorporated LA County, and you come across a green plus sign, tinted windows. Could you talk about where some of the more better mainstream, well-funded cannabis shops, what they look like now, what type of aesthetic that they're trying to demand?
Sure. In fact, looking at, I just popped this up, some other ones, perception is reality. And I think where we started 7-8 years ago, this is what we would see on your left. And today what you see is because you don't have anything, you're not fighting the old school compassionate use co-op and collective battle that LA has gone through. So you get to bring in the best of breed of businesses. So you get to dictate that aesthetics, which you see here as a compliant. But I share with you the quality of different businesses, right? This is the model and the quality of the Apple look or the doctor's office look when you look at the retail side. If you look at, this is the Planet 13, that's one of the bigger players, and the quality and aesthetics is day and night as far as enticing, any type of person to go to these. And when you look at the wholesale side, this is the thing that the perception of the illegal manufacturing versus the type of quality of machines that do this. In Colorado, they have over 600 manufacturers in, and they've had no explosions in the legal market. So the quality of the machines and how things are handled, the professionalism, you would know the difference of this versus someone that's a bakery. The only difference is if they put, THC in a product. And the quality and the professionalism here, same with the distribution, very, very subtle, very quietly, that you don't see some of the things that are there.
Could you talk to us about the significance of testing in regards to the illegal market where you don't have testing, you don't have a standard? People could potentially be smoking things laced with a wide variety of chemicals or pesticides, and what the legal market would do?
Sure. I think, probably COVID's lost a year somewhere in COVID, but I'll say 2.5 years ago, when the big issue on the vaping came out, it was a pandemic about stop vaping. It's look what's happening with the quality of a product that someone's getting access to. And as the people were getting ill or dying from it, and they got more information on it, they discovered that most of that was the illegal market. It wasn't the legal market. And so it got a bad rap to a certain point where it was almost like, people were not wanting to have any kind of edibles or manufactured goods. That has changed a lot, and I think that stepped up the industry as well as the State Department of Health to evaluate and have oversight of the testing to ensure that the quality of what is being consumed by the consumers is being tested. And I think on both sides, I think the industry kind of puts some more higher level accountability as well to make sure that their peers are complying with that.
My last comment. I understand, and I think that's wisdom where you talked about making sure that we don't put the amount of money that we could project before policy. But looking at that revenue stream, it is tempting. At potentially $700,000+ a year for the city, that would put that industry immediately in the top third of our tax revenue producers in the city. If not, I project number one. So when I read the grand jury report done out of the city of Santa Ana in Orange County, and they went back and they did a retrospective on their cannabis operation, how it was implemented, the sales tax revenue, some of the oversight. They looked at crime and they found the same thing that you just said. In fact, it decreased in surrounding areas. And then in the last pages, they talk about what they did with that money. They invested it in their youth. They created splash pads. They created new parks. They created more opportunity for their youth to engage. And so it's hard not to think about that tax revenue base. Thank you.
Councilman Lutz.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. McPherson, for your presentation. I enjoyed it. It was very neutral. When I say neutral, it's objective, and it doesn't take a stance pro or con. My personal perspective is I like to be rational, and I like to know the pros and the cons. I'm also chair of the Community Safety Ad Hoc Committee, and the mayor asked me to look into the pros and the cons of possible cannabis being legalized in the city. And so there's a lot of unanswered questions that I'd like to get answered, and I would like to have you be a part of one of our meetings in the upcoming future. We have several community members and city staff that I'd like to ask questions. I cannot ask you the questions that I have right now for the sake of time, but I do have a laundry list of questions. A lot of people find it very enticing when they think of money and they react and say yes, yes, yes. But, we represent a community at large, and we have to first see what their perspective is and decide what is best for them, or they decide what is best for their community. So I look forward to engaging you if you have the time to participate in our next Community Safety Ad Hoc Committee.
We're happy to try to make that work for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, Mayor, I just would like to add that in our community survey that we'll be releasing fairly soon, some of those questions are asked regarding cannabis to our residents, so just as a FYI.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, our next special presentation, why a citywide parking study?
Yes, Mayor, City Council, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our Director, Mike Garcia.
I'd like to introduce Walker Consultants. After much time of working with our community, Stefan Turoff and Daniel Garcia have put together a presentation that'll summarize their findings.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, city staff, and residents who may be watching. I'm Stefan Turoff. I'm Director of Planning, Principal in charge of planning for Southern California for Walker. Let's see, do I have control right here? Great, okay. As was mentioned, we began the study several years ago before COVID. We collected data before the whole COVID situation, so we think we captured some pretty typical parking behavior for residential and commercial uses. Very briefly, we're going to talk about the study objectives today. We'll talk about Walker. We focus almost entirely on parking, a little bit of transportation. We do more and more curb management. It was talk about transportation, logistics, deliveries today. Parking's getting more complicated, so we're focusing on that as well. In terms of our data collection, we'll talk about how we did that and some of our findings, and then some of the options we came up with for the city. So briefly, our objectives, this was analysis, the citywide parking study, looking at your codes, parking requirements. It was very interesting to see at the outset. You've heard all sorts of topics today, but the economic development plans for the city, transit-oriented development, all that, sort of the more boring side of all that is probably parking standards, but that really does relate to this. We looked at your parking standards for all these different land uses. It's a hot topic, as was mentioned, statewide, cities across the country, and we looked really across your several dozen parking standards that you had and came up with some options for you. So we did this study in two phases. The first phase was phase one, which was really data collection, analysis of your regulations and your program. We talked to the people who enforce. It was really heartening that you have a parking permit district program enforcement. What is it? There are 88 cities or something close to that in the county of Los Angeles. A lot of cities do not have that program in place. They do not have someone who specifically looks at parking, enforces parking. It may be done by law enforcement, even economic development, but we saw that you had that in place, and that was certainly a good finding. So we looked at all that in phase one, and then in phase two, we came up with recommendations and alternatives. Just briefly, again, we focus on parking. We've worked for over 100 cities in California, over 1,000 throughout the country. But my colleague Daniel Garcia and I, he's a planner. We work together out of the Los Angeles office. This is really what we do, and we've worked for communities all across the county and the state. So let's start with this. Obviously, as you can see, we've tilted your city a little bit to be able to fit it on the screen. But we wanted to sample different kinds of land uses: single-family, multifamily, single-family estate. We looked at the areas, which was quite nice, where you have some horse properties. Also, general commercial plan development. Your sizable industrial areas was mentioned earlier. Open space, a lot of parking issues. Even now with COVID, people are spending more time in parks, organized and informal activities. And we're seeing more parking demand everywhere around these locations. Often, are there impacts on neighboring residential areas? How often do they occur? And again, very often we see parking issues, but how often do they occur? How widespread? And that determines what we might do about them and recommend. public facilities, again, as part of that study. So these areas, I will say, across the city, just in terms of data collection, I was out there, to some extent. My colleague Daniel was out there a lot with our team collecting data. Obviously, we did not count every car on every single block across the city, but we wanted a good sampling. And again, we do this type of study often. This is a very widespread, comprehensive, I think, coverage of the different land uses and across the city. So I think we got some good information here. Daniel's going to talk a little bit more in detail about some of the findings and some of the options and recommendations we found for you.
Thank you, Stefan. Evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. So I guess I'll just get right into it. I did want to mention sort of a few things here at the top to put some of these findings into the right context. As Stefan mentioned, we did kick off this study a few years ago, end of 2018, I believe, and so all the data that we collected was in mid-2019, pre-pandemic. And so I think that's important to note in that, we wouldn't have had any impacts from the pandemic on our car counts here. Secondly, we use a term, parking congestion. That's just essentially to convey the extent to which a defined area was found to experience high demand for a limited number of spaces, thus negatively impacting that availability of parking. So parking congestion is just to sort of denote problem areas. And then thirdly, I did want to say we also use that 85% threshold throughout our study. In the parking industry, that's a sort of a general gauge of parking utilization. Anything below 85% generally denotes availability of spaces. Going above that generally shows you start getting limited availability. So what we see in the map here are, in yellow and in orange, are areas that we found where either 40% or more of the block faces in that area were 85% or higher in occupancy from when we went out and did counts. Those are the ones in yellow. I believe the one at the top is near the Jardín area, and the one at the bottom is along Church Street and the surrounding area. The orange areas denote those areas where we found that 50% or more of the blocks that we counted were documented as having 85% or more occupancy, meaning that they were pretty congested on the street there. These that we've highlighted, they really were the ones that, if you want to call them problem areas, I guess, but there really wasn't anything too extreme, I would say. They were, for the most part, there were inconveniences found, but looking at everything else in the study area, all those black areas, really, we didn't find any parking issues there. Let's see. So I noted the yellow indicate 40% or more of the block faces were 85% occupied. Those two specifically are single-family areas. The areas marked as M and T were multifamily. There we did find that there was high on-street occupancy. And so those were marked. We wanted to highlight those in orange as potentially problematic, but as I'll get into it in this next slide, we'll find something. So in looking at the entire study area as a whole, so there was some variation in, parking congested areas versus non-parking congested. So it really ran the gamut. Some areas seemed busy, like F and J that we highlighted in yellow, and then others didn't really have any problems. And those that did have problems, I think they were more to do with sort of the physical characteristics of the neighborhood. They're older on smaller lots and limited driveway space. There were there tends to be a sort of activity near areas that are busy on the street where residents will practice basically holding a space on the street for fear of losing it. So, I'm parked on the street, my, roommate comes home, we swap spaces. So that tends to happen, and that sort of leads us to think that, there really are parking problems, but in reality, it's not too extreme as it might appear. For multifamily, like I said, we did find that there was high occupancy on the street. In the areas that we looked at, one of them was Burke Street, and the other one was Rosemead and Havenwood. I forget what the other cross street is. But when we went there, we went, late in the evening, wanted to see how busy the street was. It was full. We drove through the alleyways to get a sense of how full the carports were as well. And what we ended up finding is that there were actually a lot of spaces that weren't used in the off-street. So while one would think, we're packed to the seams here because the street was full, the off-street wasn't fully utilized. And we saw that in several multifamily developments. We find that is typical of multifamily areas where you find that for preference or convenience, people will tend to park on the street first. And then going back to that practice of holding on to that space that's nearby. So given that, one of our tasks here in this study was to look at the parking requirements. Are they meeting the needs of the residents of Pico Rivera? And based on this, we seem to see that that the parking requirements, increasing them, which would mean adding more supply, doesn't necessarily solve the issue of parking on the street, of that really high occupancy that we see, because they're currently not utilizing all of their off-street parking. And so that's something that we found with the multifamily. With commercial parking, we did find that in the newer developments, the newer commercial plan developments, such as the one with the Cinepolis, those appear to have sufficient parking required. And even with the addition of restaurant pads, there seemed to be sufficient parking to accommodate those demand there. In older commercial areas, specifically by Durfee and Speedway, those older buildings tended not to have any off-street parking. There were some public lots there that served those businesses. There did seem to be some potential spillover onto the surrounding residential streets, but it hasn't gotten to a critical point yet where we think that residents are really impacted and can't park on their own streets because the streets just weren't as full. Let's see. In terms of the residential parking permit program, we did go out and count and review the program. It appears to be working for the purpose that it was intended for. The areas, they're not clogged on the streets. There seems to be availability wherever these are located. One interesting finding that we see near parks is given the high concentration of youth sports in some of these parks, we do see that residential streets surrounding them on weekends can get full, but it's really limited to that certain window of the day where youth sports are going on. Any other time that we were out there there didn't seem to be issues with parks. Let's see. So as far as options for updating the minimum parking requirements, I think we would say that we would advise that the city sort of proceed with caution. Requiring more parking generally doesn't solve the solution of, impacted parking on the street, and can have unintended and negative consequences as well, potentially, increasing the cost of housing. Walker did observe high levels of parking demand in certain areas at certain times, sure, but not all areas had high levels of parking demand, and even among the same land uses. And so what we're seeing is that sort of a blanket solution to say, oh, let's increase parking requirements for, say, single-family or multifamily. We don't really think that'll work. I think a better approach might be to sort of look at, these zones where there are problem areas and come up with operational solutions that might address some of those issues. So, for example, I mentioned the parks. So during youth sports on weekends, a lot of them are located near schools. And what we have seen in other places is, you can have an agreement with the school district where you can potentially use their parking on the weekend, maybe even charge some cars, and that money can go back to the school district. That's similar to what, say, the film industry might do when they rent out some schoolyards or parking. And let's see. So in going through this study, we did review and revise the minimum parking requirements utilizing the field observations that we made, as well as the ULI shared parking model, which pulls hundreds of data points to inform parking ratios. And so we ended up doing that for approximately 40 or so land uses, and including new ones like dialysis centers, car washes, and childcare centers. And then this just shows what the next course of action is. We're here today with this presentation. We'll follow up with one with the Planning Commission, and then there will be a study session again on September 28th, and then the future dates to be determined. But yeah, that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions.
Let me begin.
Yeah.
I read the last parking study, and the conclusion of the parking study was 82% believed that there wasn't any parking problem. Okay. Wilson Riles, the superintendent of LA Unified School District, a number of years ago, described average as having 1 foot on a refrigerator and the other foot on the stove, and saying on the average, I'm all right. The situation, that we're in, I think, bears some consideration to Bellflower's plan.
Okay.
Where they actually developed parking districts throughout the city and allowed the residents from those particular areas to actually petition to have parking, okay? Because I see in one of your areas here that has the heaviest parking, right here, the Slauson area and so on. That's a congestion situation created by Downey's, the Downey's overnight parking restrictions, okay, where the city of Downey's people,
Okay.
yeah, park across the street. So, again, I think, we need to have a plan that's going to individualize the situation and allow the residents to be able to determine, what is heavy and what is not.
Sure. And I think I think you guys have a great start with the residential parking permit program you have, and we do think that any expansion of that needs to come organically from the community and not sort of imposed by the city onto the community.
Yes, I have a comment as well. it seems as well there are, you mentioned the peak periods. This issue just came up Saturday, which we have some local seniors and veterans requesting that there's not enough nearby parking or accessible parking. So Saturday, it's this Durfee Avenue and that Speedway Drive. The American Legion is there, so they're not open all the time. They're not parking there in the evenings, but they might have an event in the morning, or they might rent their hall out. And we also have Brujeria very close by, a popular venue that's open in the evenings, early afternoons and weekends. So if Brujeria is having an event, the American Legion's having an event, and there's the apartment complex across the street. The businesses complain that the renters park they take up all of the street parking. So then the people that are frequenting the businesses can't utilize that street parking, and then the events are taking up the small, tiny public parking that we have. So there are peak periods. Are there any recommendations that you have for those types of situations where we get the mayor and I get earful? I'm pretty sure most of us on the council have got earfuls about those types of events. They've parked in the alley and they've gotten citations, and they're not happy about that. So they'll find makeshift parking spots and get citations. So if you have any recommendations for those peak periods.
Yeah, I mean, and it's gonna vary case by case, so that seems very specific. You know, the American Legion's got something going on, Brujeria's got something going on. What I would say is a lot of the times we approach this through an operational perspective. You know, is there opportunity? I'm guessing Brujeria is kind of a restaurant,
Brewery.
bar.
It's a brewery.
Brewery. So we'll approach this operationally in that, you know, hey, can we basically have them valet their people in a lot if that's a potential. So I think when we looked at this thing, you know, the exercise was, hey, look at our parking requirements to see if they're working for us. But a lot of the times we're finding sort of, hey, rather than going this blanket solution that may not work for anyone, try to pinpoint where you can find operational solutions that might work.
Sure, I like your ideas, requesting partnerships, joint partnerships with the school, other local businesses that might have a bigger lot, and they can charge a small
Exactly.
fee, make some revenue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilman?
Well, thank you for the presentation. This was definitely long-awaited presentation. I know COVID got in the way. But, you know, the question is, what motivated this study? And the motivation of this study didn't come from staff, it didn't come from council, it came from the community. And the the residents basically complained to us, and there's one issue besides speeding, you know, parking is one of those complaints that we always get. And so I understand and respect the analytical approach to this study. And I know, you know, staff from Director Garcia and his team helped, you know, in this process. If those individuals that complain about the fact that they can't find parking, and I give them now this report and tell them, by the way, from the studies, you have plenty of parking, they're going to be, throw this back in my face. Because they're going to see that, no, unless you live in that area,
Right.
you recognize that that available parking does not exist. Just some comments and some questions. I know that we all, at one point or another, are at fault of using our garages as a storage place. That reduces the amount of inventory of parking in our community. Now there's, with ADUs and so forth, so be it. Everybody has the right to utilize their space as they wish, but nonetheless, it reduces the amount of parking in the area.
Yeah.
And one thing I think we can all attest to, that over the years, we look at population growth in the city, and it has remained fairly stable. You look at housing development, pretty stable. We haven't had major. However, the growth of vehicles in our city has skyrocketed a lot more, because there were areas that you can drive and park. When you came home, those areas no longer exist.
Right.
So the question we have to ask ourselves, what's leading to that? Is it people renting rooms? Is residents renting, the garages, as there's more? Are residents having more vehicles than they need? Hey, if you have a family of 6 and all those members need to drive, then, hey, that's legitimate. But if you have one more vehicle than you need, unless you have a classic car, in my opinion, why should you have that?
Yeah.
And so it creates an inconvenience and also a security issue. Because if I have a daughter that comes from work late at night and has to block 2 blocks away and has to now walk because somebody chose to have more cars than they need, then that's a concern, a security issue. So those are all points that we need to look at and address as we move forward, because at the end of the day, from my opinion, the status quo of just leave it alone is not, because as I mentioned earlier, the development, housing development, the density is going to increase. What are we going to do to slow that down from a parking?
I will say, when we looked at the residential parking program, I believe now the policy is that single-family residential units can purchase, wherever they set up a boundary, that they can purchase an unlimited number of permits. We think that we should probably tweak that down. There are models out there, like City of Pasadena, for example. What they do is they basically say the number of permits that you can buy is, it has to match basically the number of off-street spaces you have. So if you have, let's say, 2 off-street spaces in your garage, that's what you can fit, You're only, sorry, I said it wrong. You'll only, if you have 2 spaces, let's say you have 3 cars registered to that home, you can only apply for 1 permit, because you already have 2 spaces that you can use, and we're only gonna, as the city, we're only gonna give you 1 to be able to park on the street. And so it kind of forces the residents to make full use of the parking that's already provided to them before they start impacting the street. There are different ways of sort of.
And as you mentioned, the question to ask is the vehicles registered at an
Right.
address in the city of Pico Rivera? And if they're not, unless they're visiting, the question is, why not?
Mm.
And that's the question. So, personally, I appreciate the
Yeah.
report. Obviously, for us that live here and see and get to experience it, I think my interpretation of it is a little more, and I think it's important for us to expand on this, because I do believe that examples that you mentioned, operational solutions,
Sure.
Some potential districts that we create, I think it's essential, because there is a lot of problem areas and it's not because only because there's small streets, but it's just more vehicles in that block that should be there. So,
Sure.
thank you.
Remember?
One thing on that.
Laura?
If you don't mind, I'm sorry, just to follow up on your point, point is well taken. People are having problems, and you show them an analytical report. Great, what are they going to do with it? I think just 2 points. The fact that the residential parking permit district, that all of them that we looked at, there was not really a congestion problem there, showing that your program worked. And I think what Daniel was saying was, to expand that is a solution, and not that we want to force anybody to do something that they don't want to do, but really have them consider. The street is finite in terms of the number of spaces. Sometimes you can minimize a red curb or something like that, but ultimately it's finite. But when there is a program like that, it makes people think, just be a little more careful. Can I clean out my garage or my carport? So we're saying, that's what I think we started out with, saying that the operational solution is something to think about. As far as the minimum parking requirements, we get asked that question and study it so often. It takes time to take effect. And the other thing is, it's not retroactive. So the problems that exist today will not be solved. You could double your parking requirements for multifamily or single family or all sorts of uses. That could help moving forward. It will not help anything today, although people will say, of course, okay, you're beginning to address the problem. But that's why we wanted to emphasize you have a good program in place, and to expand that, letting neighbors decide where to put it in the near term would probably have the greatest effect. And then keeping in mind that even if you increase parking requirements, unless there's management on the street, very often, people want to park closest to their unit. That might be on the street. They don't want to navigate in. They don't want to open the gate. So we have seen that increasing parking requirements sometimes help, but again, that problem on the street's still there. So again, just your program is looking really good. What you have on the street, maybe expanding it could be a good short-term solution moving to the future. Just want not to put too fine a point on it. But
Thank you. I'll just be very brief. I think this gives us a good template in terms of looking at where we need to be methodical in terms of looking at various programs that can be implemented. I like the idea about using the valet parking there for Brujeria. If you look at item J there, that area, I went and I walked that footprint the other day. We have a public parking lot behind that establishment. We allow that business owner to use so many parking spots to supplement because of COVID. It's a great fit. We then incorporated the trailer in front. I'm sorry, I'm not using the correct language on that.
Parklet.
Thank you. But by doing that, we took away at least 2 to 3 parking spots. I love the idea. I'm all for that idea. And it's something that we may consider up and down Durfee Avenue as we develop that area. But I think we need to look at this one particular area, maybe do it piecemeal, try to incorporate some innovative ideas, because there is more public parking, but it's a block or 2. Behind Chase Bank, there's another public parking spot. It's a block of way. So using a valet for the service for that area would be perfect.
Sure.
But once again, it's working with those companies, working with that Caramore clinic right next door, because that's an issue also with them, working with the American Legion, and maybe getting all these businesses to try to buy into a public-private valet service to help offset, because it's just so congested. And you look at that area, you look at that business, Brujeria, there's so much potential there for growth, but we just need to make sure that they're able to offer parking for their customers and their surrounding businesses. So thank you, and I look forward on engaging this further. Thanks.
Councilman Lutz?
Thank you for the presentation. Listening to everybody speak, sounds like in the commercial areas, there are reasonable solutions that can be implemented right away. And when we're talking about the main boulevards where you have R3 zoning and higher, there's also, say, restrictive permits that prevent other non-city residents from coming into our city and using our residents' parking lots, parking spaces. But when you go into 100% suburban area where you just have residential R1, single-family homes with narrow streets and one-car garage homes, and those housing tracts were built in the 50s, is there a solution or is there just not? Because I'd like to be realistic with residents. I don't have all the answers, and neither do you or any of us, and sometimes we don't have an answer to that. What do you do when you're confronted? Because there's a lot of congestion in the pure R1 areas. What do we do?
So one of the things we've seen, and Stefan, you can probably speak to this better than me, is City of Long Beach, the Belmont Shore community. I think most of those houses were built in the 20s and 30s. It's single family R1. But Stefan can talk about the program that they.
Right, actually, Belmont Shore, I mean, obviously, excuse me, a different community, but an older community, very dense, nearly 100% occupancy. Taking a step back, and we recognize, to your point, for parking, for the most part, we're dealing with a really finite resource. So your point, is there a solution? We look, well, there is parking off-street to some extent, driveways, people's garages, people's carports. But at a certain point, there's only so much room, and you're asking people to some extent, to walk farther, to go up, there are stackers, just things that effectively are not adding parking where you want it, which is at the front door, which is where everybody wants it. In Belmont Shore, the garages were so narrow for the Model Ts. We made a recommendation and they implemented a garage cleanup day for the people. And if you're like me, having a garage, have a lot of stuff in there, I really ought to get rid of it. The city had a program where they rolled out dumpsters and things. People who, it was hard to clean out their garages, sometimes older people, but the city facilitated that for people who just hadn't gotten around to it or couldn't do it, to make those spaces available. We also recommended a program which was basically to make sure that the garage doors and things were large enough, if possible, to accommodate vehicles. They had not done that. It sounds expensive, but when you look at the cost of building parking anywhere, when you say, oh, why don't we add a surface lot? Why don't we add a garage, which of course we're not talking about here, doing an improvement to an existing garage to make sure that a resident can get in and out of there is a cost-effective thing to do. At a certain point, though, denser neighborhoods, which often are very desirable, we have, a real estate situation these days where kids are graduating high school, in college, staying at home, working, staying at home because the cost of housing is so expensive, and now they're home with a car. So the parking permit program that we do have, we want to encourage that, say, this is a resource on the street, it's a shared resource, it's finite. Typically, there is enough space if we all are careful with it and say, okay, I do have a space in my driveway. If we're not switching cars back and forth because, oh, you're coming home, let me move my car and then you take my space. We see that all the time. The space on the street is held, the space, your reserved space in your own property is not. So we just want to manage that a little better. So there is a solution to a point. We think there is. It's all about efficiency. It's allocation of a scarce resource. But at a certain point, yes, it's going to get that. And, well, that's what the residential parking permit program does.
Thank you for that. There is a solution to a point in the suburban R1 areas.
Yes.
And there's no extra land that we can create for each individual property owner, but we can help them with maybe a 1 or 2 day a year clean out your garage, so if you don't use it as a garage for a car.
A non-operational vehicle that sits on the street. And again, when we say to a point, the program we have, and we see cities across the state, it's pretty good. And when we looked at the areas where the program was in place, it worked. So why not apply those programs in other places where you're having an issue?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may have one comment. I was thinking about the peak areas that we mentioned, the brewery and the American Legion VFW have, also off of Slauson, Bermuda Street, have bars. So we could think of other, we don't want them to park. So perhaps Uber, taxi, Lyft, dial-a-ride, drop-off, and pick-up locations, easily accessible, and encourage people to get alternative transportation. Because if they're going to go there and partake in beverages, correct? We can think of, I remember we had concerts in the park several years ago, and we had thousands of people coming, limited parking. We had a designated Uber, Lyft drop-off area. So thinking about these outside of the box areas would be really helpful. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, this is the second report that I've read, or when are we going to do something about it?
Well, we actually have occurred parking districts now. We'd like to work with staff. We want to meet with the planning commission, get their input, and we're going to come back to city council with some
So it's
recommendations.
going to go to planning?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, can we have a 5-minute break? Yeah. Okay, 5 minutes. Council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is the first public hearing. This is the continued public hearing, item number 1, approval of a proposed resolution determining that the public interest and necessity require the acquisition of streetlights owned by Southern California Edison located within the city of Pico Rivera by eminent domain. Respectfully, Mayor, we would ask that the city council entertain a motion this evening to have the public hearing open and continue this matter to your next city council meeting of, that would be September the 14th. Some new information was presented to my office just at the meeting. Plus, there's been a revised resolution that's been placed at your dais this evening. And I think for purposes of having the public have the opportunity to see the revisions and the council see the revisions, that we would be respectfully requesting to continue this matter. Continue item number 1
Continue number, okay.
to September the 14th. We have a motion to that?
We have a
effect?
motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a second? Vote?
Councilmember Camacho?
Yes.
Councilmember Lara?
Yes.
Councilmember Lutz?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dr. Sanchez?
Yes.
Mayor Elias?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That moves us on to item number 2, Mr. Mayor. Item number 2 is a public hearing, consideration of a resolution submitting the fiscal year 2020-21 consolidated annual performance and evaluation report. Public hearing would be appropriate to open the public hearing at this time and proceed with this item.
Do we have a motion? No, what?
We have no public comment?
No.
It's back
Okay.
to the council level for a motion to consider approval of the resolution.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved?
Second?
Second.
Okay. Vote, please.
Councilmember Camacho?
Yes.
Councilmember Lara?
Yes.
Councilmember Lutz?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dr. Sanchez?
Yes.
Mayor Elias?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. We go to the consent calendar. I will go around the dais to see if any council member is interested in pulling an item. Pro
Mayor?
Tem?
Mayor? Public comments?
Oh, yes. I'm going to do public comments, and then I'm going to ask you, okay? All right. Public comments. Written communications were received by Jose Sanchez regarding item number 9, smoke shop businesses. Item number 11, shopping cart ordinance. Item number 13, pavement management update, and Rosemead Boulevard payment CIP. Now, we all have copies of those emails, okay? 50041. Maria Elena Perales regarding water restrictions. Okay. Navales Reese and Kelly Vela regarding the after-school care and programs. Francisco Martinez of Southern California Edison provided a memorandum to City Council regarding item number 1. Okay. Emails containing the written communications were provided to all City Council members. Now, Mayor Pro Tem, do you
I have none.
want to poll? Okay. Councilman? No?
I don't have anything.
None.
No?
None.
Okay, we have none. Okay. Vote? A motion to
So moved?
move this? Okay, second?
Councilmember Camacho?
Yes.
Councilmember Lara?
Yes.
Councilmember Lutz?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dr. Sanchez?
Yes.
Mayor Elias?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, then we go to our regular agenda. Okay, minutes, discussion item, discussion,
Mr. Mayor.
anything? Pavement, yep.
Yeah, I'd like to move that we move this item to the next meeting. There was a memo that was given to me yesterday by legal counsel. I'd like to look at that a little bit more closely. And I'd like to consider this at our next city council meeting if the city council would oblige.
Okay, that's on item number 8.
That's item number 8. That's my motion to move this.
Okay. We need a motion for that?
That's the motion, and
Okay, second? I second it.
Okay.
Vote?
Councilmember Camacho?
Yes.
Councilmember Lara?
Yes.
Councilmember Lutz?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dr. Sanchez?
No.
Mayor Elias?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Number 9, discussion item, smoke shop businesses. This was, Councilman Lutz,
Yes.
begin your discussion about this?
Well, I wanted to engage the city staff first by asking, my first question is, how many smoke shops do we have currently in the city? And see where we can take that from there. I first like to know how many we have at the moment.
Yes, Councilmember Lutz, we currently have 6 licensed smoke and vape shops within the city, and 1 more is in process.
One more is in what?
In process.
How many did you say?
It was 6 currently. There could be upwards of 7 in the near future.
Now, what I was wanting to propose is a moratorium on future smoke shops, not affecting the existing smoke shops. This current in-process smoke shop, if there was a moratorium created, would it affect and contain that one that's in process?
No, because they are currently in process. I don't think that what we would put into place would go into effect before they are able to get their license in place, so.
What is the time period for doing a moratorium from start to end?
You could go 2 different routes, an urgency ordinance or a moratorium, and I'm going to look to our legal counsel, Arnold Glassman, city attorney, to give a little more background on that timing.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the process, as Mr. Garcia indicated, the quickest approach is to impose a moratorium. We could bring back that on an urgency basis at your next meeting. If the council adopts it, it requires a 4/5 vote, and that would be implemented and would give staff, I believe it's 45 days in which to review and analyze the issue and bring back further report at that time. And then if the council is agreeable to whatever terms the new ordinance would read, then that can get also adopted as an urgency ordinance and put into place right away. But at that point, there's a public hearing that is required.
So as a council, we do have the opportunity to implement both an emergency ordinance and a standard moratorium.
That is correct with a 4/5 vote.
With a 4/5 vote, okay. Well, Mayor and staff, the reason why I brought this up, putting in a moratorium of smoke shops in the city of Pico Rivera is, one, because I live in the community, and I think too many smoke shops would be detrimental to the character of the city. If there are already smoke shops in the city, well, they're welcome to stay and be profitable as any business should. But when you get to a certain threshold where now you're infiltrated by so many smoke shops, I don't believe that's the look that we want for the community now and in the future. And as an elected official of residents who want to maintain a beautiful city with a certain character and look, I feel and would like to make a motion that we implement both the emergency ordinance and also implement a moratorium on future smoke shops. May I have a second on both?
I have a second.
That would be brought back at your next meeting, correct?
Yeah, so for discussion for the next meeting, may I have a second?
I second that. But I have a question.
Oh, okay, you second it?
I second.
Okay, so we have it on the agenda, okay?
Okay, so my question is for the one in process, legal counsel, if we were to put an emergency moratorium and potentially block them, are we opening ourselves up to legal liability?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the answer to that is no. As long as we follow the process, and I just want to make sure the motion, there's clarity to the motion. Is the motion to direct staff to bring back an urgency ordinance or bring back information for discussion of an urgency ordinance? Because they're 2 different things. If you're wanting to implement a moratorium, then we would need to bring back a moratorium ordinance, urgency ordinance, that can be acted upon at your next meeting. Again, the city would then have a 45-day window to review and evaluate, staff would be required to do a study and an analysis to bring back an ordinance. So, and it would only apply wouldn't apply to any existing smoke shops. It would only apply to anyone who's applying in the future. Now, if there's anybody in the application process, it could also, well, if their application does not get processed before you adopt an urgency ordinance, then they would be temporarily barred from moving forward because of the urgency ordinance, once it's adopted.
I would like to offer a friendly amendment that we not only agendize this for discussion, but to approve the urgency ordinance.
Or consider, I don't,
Yeah,
because you'd have to get it before you can approve it. Thank you.
thank you.
You accept that?
Yes, I accept that. So just for clarity, want to have discussion and a vote
Okay.
on implementing the emergency ordinance. Mr. City Manager?
Yeah, I would just like to say that just because we have that number now, we can actually reduce that number with increased enforcement. I like to say when I was at the CED, we did an urgency ordinance for massage parlors. We had 11 in our city at the time, and I think right now we have 4. That's because we enforced, we got them for doing illegal activities, and we revoked their license, and they couldn't renew it. So,
Councilman, I'd like to just provide a little economist advice. Economists get rid of things by increasing their taxes. Would that take a vote? Would it require a vote?
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, that would require a vote of the community.
Okay.
Raising taxes under Prop 218, it require, yeah, imposing taxes, now again, there may be fees that are assessed to a smoke shop, business license fees and the like, but we have to be cautious about singling out any one particular business for additional business license fees. But a tax that would be imposed on smoke shops and tobacco products is probably going to be preempted by state law, number one, and number two, any intent or any effort to try and increase the taxes is going to require a vote by the electorate.
However, Mayor, if I may, several cities do have retail, tobacco retail licensing, where the cities charge a fee to retail licenses. So I would like to explore that idea to introduce a tobacco retail licensing program. If we could, I'd like to move to bring that to discussion along with this tobacco ordinance, urgency ordinance.
And all of that can be part of the analysis after, again, the urgency ordinance is, if the council adopts an urgency ordinance, then that stops all smoke shops. 45 days, that item has to return back to the city council. There's also provision that you can extend it, I think, out to 180 days, if my recollection serves me correctly. But that requires a full public hearing and the like. So, but those are all issues that staff will be able to review and analyze.
Thank you.
Councilman, are you satisfied?
I'm happy that we're going to have a discussion here. And for the existing smoke shops, they're just in their right, just like any other business, to conduct a business legally and generate profits. I just want to preserve the character of the community and prevent a boatload of smoke shops throughout the city. That's the whole purpose of this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll go with number 10, discussion items, small business grant, second round. Recommendation, discuss the potential of a second round of the small business grant program, whether the existing program guidelines should be modified. Was that at your behest?
I think this is a continuation dealing with the businesses that have been impacted around Rosemead and Beverly Boulevard.
And it's part of the, now that we've distributed the majority of the initial monies and funds that we've had available, now with the perfect opportunity to discuss a citywide, since we can go specific to an area, to develop, to determine what amount should we allocate, if any. So Mr. Director, if you can expand on that?
So with our last round of small business grants that we issued using community development block grant funds, they were quite successful. We do have 3 remaining grants and potentially a 4th. We're working with those businesses to make sure that all their application material are submitted. We believe that if we receive that, we should be able to issue those additional. So that would be 16 awards, we're hoping. 12 have already been given their money. And so the item before you tonight is just to make certain if you want to continue that program, we can reopen it. It would be competitive to any businesses within the city, and we would do our best to market those available funds to businesses that are in need.
What type of businesses are dominating the
The majority we received in the latest round, the city council that was authorized, I believe it was the second meeting in April. Those were the majority of them. I want to say 70% of them were restaurants, so.
We have to do something other than restaurants.
Well, I think and after the fact that we promoted and allocated this funding, many businesses came and said, you know what, I wasn't aware, didn't know, hence the discussion we should having today. And then specifically speaking to some of the businesses along Beverly and Rosemead that were impacted not only by COVID, but the construction. But again, not just those businesses, many throughout the city. I think it creates an opportunity, and I think we should continue the program and allocate additional funding for it. We allocated $200,000, right? And so now we have some additional funding with the stimulus, what it's purpose for. I think we should put, I'll throw a number out there, $500,000 in there. If it's utilized or not, maybe we expand it, maybe we don't use it all, but I think 500,000 would be an adequate number. Just throw it out there for discussion.
Yeah, if that is the will of the city council, we would be more than happy to move forward on that program with ARPA funds and with any remaining CDBG small business grant funds. So
What is the maximum amount a business can apply for?
we were doing $10,000 grants.
Okay.
We
Would you go up to 50,000?
The city council can absolutely modify the parameters of the
Smaller,
manual.
smaller businesses and so on, the $50,000 would, the smaller manufacturing.
I think the program, the guidelines would continue the same unless we modified it. But I think identifying those, I think one of the discussions we had before was that there were a lot of other businesses that had the resources to take advantage of all these other federal, state, and county funding, and many other smaller micro businesses did not. And so I think this is probably why, one of the reasons we discussed it, just concentrating those efforts there with these groups. I mean, I know we can't discriminate as it relates to the business, right?
That's correct.
But at the same time, we can look at the micro business aspects, those businesses that are struggling the most, I think.
Councilman Lara?
Yeah, my concern with deviating from the 10,000 is that if you go higher than that, you got some small businesses in the area of, the impact area of Rosemead and Beverly, who would potentially apply. That'd be a great deal of money for them. I think it would be more money than what they kind of pull in within 6 months, to be honest with you, some of the businesses that have complained. So I'm a little concerned about raising the bar that high. I think keeping it at maybe 10,000 with looking to expand, but then are we talking about the 500,000 coming from the American Rescue? Before I would venture into saying, this is how much I want to set aside for this program, we really need to have a broader discussion on where all this money is going.
Yeah.
It's 14 million. I like the idea. I'm yes on expansion, but I just don't know if 500,000 right now is I know you said you're just throwing it out there, but I think we need to have a broader discussion on what the needs are for this community and how much should we set aside for this program.
I think, no doubt, and hopefully we will have this meeting sooner or later that we discussed and we all agreed to have this because we got to prioritize these funds. I just, time is of essence for a lot of these folks, and they're pretty much on, on fumes, I should say. And so we just got to make sure that we don't wait too long to create an opportunity that they need yesterday.
My suggestion, if you would take me up on this, why don't we do what we did last time, where we could hold a small committee meeting, talk about this idea, flesh it out, and then bring it back to council, come up with the numbers, see how many businesses are still out there that want to take advantage of this grant funding, and then come back with council with the idea, and then talk to the city manager and city staff about the greater picture of this money.
That works?
Mayor Pro Tem?
City manager, don't we have a ARPA work study group pending to discuss this? overall?
Yeah, September, I believe, 28th.
I think it's appropriate to put it on that area.
Yeah, I'm in line with Mayor Pro Tem having a study session. We're all 5 council members, and that could happen after the Economic Development Ad Hoc Committee has their gathering, and then bring the findings to the study session so that we have more data, and in hopes of implementing this sooner than later for our business community.
What is the study session again? I'm sorry.
I believe it was September 28th, or the last council meeting of September.
So I'm all for, again, having this general conversation because we had to really touch on this issue. And we'll have this economic development meeting committee sooner than later. The fact that we already approved the process, Director Garcia, when we allocate and say, because we'll discuss it at the study session, but we have to bring it back to council for approval. Is that can it begin to apply within that time? Because that now puts us into 2.5 months, maybe 3 months, of something that I kind of feel that we're going to approve anyways. Unless I don't hear any particular objections as far as, it could be, but nonetheless, I just want to see what the timeline is.
Well, if I may, Mayor and Council, the suggestion I might have is that we utilize the remaining community development block grant funds at September 14th. You give the authorization on that. We bifurcate the ARPA fund discussion for September 28th. Because we're going to need to do advertising, there's a process we need to follow with community development block grant funds.
See, my 29 years of business tells me that $10,000 is enough to put you out of business. Okay? It just isn't enough, to be able to finance the development and so on. So, the 10,000 is just, again, is not sufficient. Okay?
I like your suggestion.
Yeah.
I would like to let the mayor and council know that anything less than 10,000 gets very onerous for the applicants, all the paperwork. Even 10,000 might be difficult. Some people backed away, they didn't want to deal with the paperwork. So I would suggest maybe a higher amount, 15,000. We've seen other cities go 15, 20,000 with their CDBG block grant.
And just because they've already receive a 10,000 CDBG block grant, mini grant, so to speak, that doesn't exclude them from also receiving additional ARPA, right?
No.
So that could supplement what they've already received.
That's correct.
I think expanding the amount is definitely suitable as well.
And we'll bring back more information. As I mentioned to you before, in the first round of the PPE loans, the Pico Rivera businesses received over $50 million of loans from the federal government. That was the first round. There were some additional rounds that I'm sure they received additional monies. So where we want to allocate these resources to where the neediest of our businesses are. We also may want to prioritize ones that have been most impacted by COVID. And we have those statistics to show that our dine-in restaurants have been heavily impacted, our gas stations have been impacted. So we can focus a little bit more on other businesses that have been impacted by COVID. Okay.
Any more discussion? Councilman?
Yes, Mayor. Mr. City Manager, you did mention that some businesses that were impacted more than others have the opportunity to have access to these funds over other businesses?
No, I had mentioned we had in the initial rounds of the PPE loan program, the Pico River businesses under sales of, I believe it was $1 million, received about $50 million of federal government money in the first round.
Okay, okay.
End of discussion on 11? Number 12, wait a minute, number 11, discussion shopping cart ordinances. I don't know who brought that one up, so.
Councilmember Lutz.
Mayor, I brought that up. I just wanted to have a discussion more in depth. Shopping carts, there are ordinances in place in the city. There's shopping cart, there's use restrictions, there's removal from the premises and penalties for removal from the premises and impoundment and unlawful possession. And I just wanted the city manager to give me a general idea of how we can improve this ordinance.
Yeah, this ordinance was created in 1996, and so it is definitely is dated. As you can see, some of the fines that are associated with that are very nominal. We definitely, with council direction, we can bring back a beefed-up ordinance that can expand on those fines and fees, impose some additional requirements on some of our operators that have these shopping carts, making sure that they have these electronic devices that lock, things of that nature. So we can definitely bring something back that's more robust if council's directs us to do.
So again, if we have our operators like our grocery stores and other stores have a little bit more restrictive items on those shopping carts that prevent them from being stolen, it goes in line with the beautification of our community, and that's what it's all about. We have an opportunity to beautify our city bit by bit. And so if I can get a second on bringing this back for further discussion from one of the council members or all, that would be great.
Second.
Second?
Thank you.
Yeah, and just so council knows, we'll probably be working on this and bringing it back sometime in late September. I'll check with staff.
Okay. Number 12, translation of profile. Let's see, that was something that I have brought up, okay, and looking at the report, I don't think that we can really discuss it because we are still talking about a survey that has to be done, begins August 31st. So I would like to make a motion that we table it till next meeting.
Second.
Okay. I saw the smile on your face, so I think you agree. Okay. Oh, and by the way, I have to say, okay, that I've gotten a lot of good comments on this, except one gentleman.
Yeah, we're actually expanded. You're going to see it not only in Spanish, you're going to see it in Chinese and French, and in China, and so we'll definitely expand upon that. So you open the door.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Just remind everybody that I did open the door. Okay. 13, payment management update, adopt final report recommendations. Number 1, adopt the final report for pavement management system and budget scenario, or to achieve a citywide pavement condition index of 67 and maintain a backlog of 23%. And 2, authorize staff to prepare specifications and plan for year 1 list recommended in the PMS.
Mayor, City Council, I have Terry Rodriguez, our interim Public Works Director, to answer questions or a presentation if requested.
Presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. We have with us this evening from IMS, who's the company that prepared our pavement management system, Jim Turek, who's the Western Region Client Services Manager. And we do have a presentation that Jim will be making on our system.
Thank you, Terry. Mayor, council members, over the course of the next 10 minutes, I hope to cover some of the following topics, including an overview of pavement condition, specifically Pavement Condition Index, PCI, as well as the analysis and project planning. Thirdly, staff recommendation, and then any questions that may come up from the presentation or the topic in general. First off, a little background, going back to June 2018, the city council approved certifications of participation for $30 million. 2 years after that, the city authorized $70,000 for IMS to conduct a pavement condition survey in an effort to determine the city's current pavement condition and develop a pavement strategy over a 5-year period. That same strategy is planned to incorporate the utility master plan. Obviously, you don't want to do a rehab strategy and then cut into that road in the coming months. Just some basic numbers for you. The city maintains 152 centerline miles based on that map that extends from LA all the way to Santa Maria. The average network pavement condition index is 55. That's on a scale of 1 to 100. And the estimated value of the pavement network is approximately just over $200 million. Taking a step back, talking a little about the benefit of pavement management, that red curve is the pavement deterioration over time, starting from a brand-new road at a 100 PCI, and then deteriorating over time to a very poor, unusable condition. Over the course of the first 40% of the pavement life, that pavement deteriorates at a nominal 15% drop in quality, and conversely, over the next 15% of the pavement life, it drops 40% in quality. So there is a critical point to capture the minimal spend, just doing lightweight surface treatments early and often, just to keep that road in the very good category. Otherwise, as you can see, if you wait, you're spending 8 times more money just to get it back to that same very good category. A little about the pavement condition index for the city. Again, 0 is failed, 100 is excellent. The pavement management software that the city utilizes is StreetSaver, and it categorizes that 0 to 100 into 4 descriptive terms. First, very good is 85 to 100. Roads at risk are 60 to 85. Poor is considered 30 to 60, and very poor, 0 to 30. It was mentioned backlog is at 24%. Those are the roads in the very poor category, and those are no longer eligible for even an overlay. They need to be fully reconstructed. Big ticket items, I don't know if it's actually $1 million per mile, but that's a ballpark rule of thumb. So when 1/4 of your total network is in that category, it's a very concerning number. The breakdown there is shown with the, I think it's 20% there in the very good, 21 in the at-risk, over 1/3 in the poor, and as mentioned, 24% in the very poor category. Some representative conditions of your roads when we did the survey with our laser van equipped with cameras. As you can see, one of each of the categories is represented here, starting with the top left, Marjorie Street, a very good road, essentially like new condition. Moving to the left, an at-risk road with a PCI of 67. We're seeing a little longitudinal and transverse cracking. The bottom left is in poor condition, has a PCI of 51, some wheel path, alligator, and longitudinal cracking, and then one in the very poor category, a PCI of 14, which has severe alligator cracking and potholes. It's an alley. It has that center drainage. That's not even factored into the PCI. It's accounted for, is the better way of putting that. So a lot of room for improvement on that particular road. We also did a comparison to local agencies. Obviously, Pico Rivera there on the far left with the 55 PCI as mentioned. Pasadena, Azusa, Downey, Whittier, all in the 57 to 59 range, and then rounding out with LA County at a PCI of 65. Here's a map to illustrate the general condition of the roads. As highlighted here, all those roads that are very good are in blue, green for the at-risk. Then we have the other colors for the roads that are in worse condition, as we've mentioned earlier, just to give you a color sense on the map. And further breaking out the pavement condition by functional class. So the highest classification of roads is the arterials, your major roads, followed by collectors, then locals, then alleys. The only category in the at-risk is the arterials at 64 PCI. The next highest number are the local roads with a 53 PCI, and that makes up roughly 2/3 of the overall network. And then the collectors and alleys combined for 10%, and they're in the low to mid 40s. So rehab unit costs, these are the various strategies used by the city. And this is before we even talk about concrete, but primarily asphalt. We've got slurry seal, cape seal, right around the $5 and $10 per square yard cost. That's the lightweight treatment I mentioned earlier, doing that often. As mentioned down in the bottom there, the analysis strategy is to implement those as much as possible before they fall into that lower category, which is an overlay, mill and overlay, where you're removing some of the top layer and then replacing it with new, anywhere from 1.5 to 3 inch asphalt, fresh asphalt. Obviously, that cost is quite a bit higher than the surface treatments, close to $27 per square yard. And on top of that, if you are then needing to do a reconstruct for asphalt, it doubles again, or more than doubles, at $60 per square yard. Interesting graph here. So the one on the top left is the current condition. We talked about that. The PCI is 55. And then clockwise, starting in the top middle, if we were to do nothing at all, just let the roads deteriorate without touching them, PCI would drop to 44, just over 2 points per year. And even more scary is the backlog dropping 21 points over that same amount of time. So 4 points per year drop. And as you can see, that's close to half of the roads needing to be reconstructed. The next category is a front-loaded $24 million over 5 years. As you can see, $10 million in the first, $5 in the next 2, and then $2 in the remaining 2. The result of that is the PCI of 57, up a couple from where it currently is, but the backlog drops 10 points to 34%. In the bottom right, we have a pipe dream, if you will, scenario. Number 3 with $100 million or $20 million over 5 years consecutively. In that scenario, the PCI would jump all the way up to 85, which we rarely see anywhere, and the backlog would be 0. The recommended is the $12 million per year. $60 million spent over that 5-year period. The PCI would jump 12 points, and the backlog would be virtually the same as it is currently. Here's a shot of just a random sample neighborhood. On the left, we have that do-nothing scenario. You can see quite a bit of red, quite a bit of orange, light green, roads that are just deteriorating, not getting better, getting a lot worse. Comparing that with the recommended $12 million annually, you see a lot of dark green, some light green. Yes, there's still some red and some orange, but much less than you see in the comparative on the left. Here's the current one-year street selection, and this again ties into the utility master plan. You can see there's a fair amount of light surface treatment as well as some overlay. And I think there's 1 or 2 reconstructs planned for year 1. So, staff recommendations. A recommendation to adopt scenario 4 to achieve the projected PCI goal of 67 and maintain a backlog of 23, $12 million annually. Direct staff to identify and recommend the necessary additional financial resources to continue the implementation of scenario 4 after the second year. Approve staff to prepare design plans for list of recommended streets. And rehabilitation strategies, should be revised and reviewed annually. Finally, the city should resurvey the streets every 3 years to update condition data, track pavement performance, and to comply with the current rules and regulations for funding resources from agencies.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Thank you. Good information. I have a question for you. I know that we get comments and emails from residents. Certain residents feel that their area is certainly very poor although it may not be such according to your indicators. Is there any certain specific area? Your map here is a very good indicator, but it's kind of small and I can't see the street name, where there's one area that's very poor over not, in terms of north, south, east, west, the arterial roads, the major roads. Where is the area of focus where things are really poor?
I'd leave that for Terry as far as specific. As far as how the pavement management program works itself, it doesn't look at areas, it looks at
Overall,
ideal
large.
sedition, yeah, where best to spend the money. If it's already in really bad shape, if you do a worse first, you're spending $2 million to do 2 miles, and you're not touching the other 150 miles, and you got a good glimpse of where that will take you if that's the approach. So it really is grabbing projects in their need year before they fall into that more expensive treatment.
And even with the 12 million per year, we'll still be at the at-risk category.
Right.
If I could add to that, I mean, I'm not familiar enough with the city to know geographically where some of the worst roads are, but this tool will allow us in the engineering department to answer any resident or citizen who might call and say, what about my street? I think it's in bad shape. They're probably right. They probably have a good sense of the condition of their street. And we can confirm that. If it doesn't agree with our report, we can certainly go out and take a look and amend our report if necessary and help them understand where in the queue, if you will, their street might be in terms of getting in the program and getting some work done on it. So for the first time, we'll have this tool that we can use that's interactive with residents or anyone else who has a question.
Thank you. And I imagine Pico Rivera, we have a lot of traffic, so the cities that have very good roads probably are very rural, I'm assuming?
Well, they're not really too rural because quite often the rural communities have much more road per resident, if you will, because they're spread out. And so those communities have a different problem. They have a lot of road to maintain and not a lot of density of businesses to generate taxes to maintain those roads. There are actually very few communities in California that actually have a road system that would be in the top category, the 85 and above. I've only worked in one in my career that's been that good. And they happen to be a reasonably small but high sales tax community. So the community had those kinds of resources. The average for the state, we saw LA counties at 65. I think the state of California average is about 67. So that at-risk category, or what I'd call a good category, getting into the upper 60s is pretty good in our state, and given the resources and the amount of wear and tear on our road system. So bringing us up to a target of 67 will actually put us right in the middle of the communities all across the state.
Thank you.
Councilman?
A few years back, we had different administration, and we used a payment condition index to determine how to move forward in fixing our roads. At that time, did you look at or compare to that one index that we used before to make that to analyze this particular index?
I personally didn't. I know that our policy is to treat each project as a new project and not be influenced, but possibly Terry.
I'd like to comment on that. That study was done through a drive-by. It wasn't done using this type of analysis. So it was somebody just driving to the streets and making an observation in that assessment.
So I bring it up only because I want to make sure that this time around we're actually doing it right. Because I mean, at the time it was presented to us a condition index that illustrated to us that if we did something creative in the funding aspect, we leverage our transportation dollars to get the bonding that we ended up having. And it was presented to us that it would fix close to 80% of our roads, basically scenario 6, that it would have simple slurry, cap seal, and then some complete reconstruction. And we were be able to, again, we promoted the roads that we were going to do. And of course, new administration comes, new staff, and we look at that and reassess it, one, on the basis that we should not fix roads, that we have to fix our infrastructure. Smart, understood, logical. And then, of course, I hear this and I see this as a completely, we're going to get scenario 6 based on, scenario 3. Scenario 3. That's what we're going to get. And so to hear that we were not close to it, it's, again, I'm hoping that we're doing it right this time, because that just shows you that sometimes information that you rely on, you make decisions on, and based on what is presented, and doesn't always prove to be the case, so.
I can't speak for the past firm, but I know that our firm uses state-of-the-art equipment.
I just think,
Several
it was just
engineers.
important for me to point that out, because
Right.
again, we received information, we presented to the community, we committed to the community, and that was not the case, and it's unfortunate. But we own it, and I'm glad we're here, and we're looking at to obviously doing it and doing it right this time. And I'm anxious to move forward with one of these options.
Member Lara?
Where are we at with our bond money and spending it?
We still have the first allocation, and we're ready to spend once council gives direction on what option.
If I could add to that, if approved this evening, we would plan to bid the, those streets that you see on the map in November and begin construction after the new year for the first round.
Councilman Lutz?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. City Manager, will our new updated website have the ability for residents to log in and see when their street is going to be fixed?
Yes, we actually could put that up. We have GIS capability now, and so we can definitely put that up. We may get into that little demonstration, a little preview of what that means on the city manager report, so the answer is yes.
Great, great.
Mr. City Manager, on this, the item 1 and item 2, are they interdependent or are they dependent or independent? Because number 1 says adopt the final report. Do we make a motion to adopt the final report?
Yeah, it's a staff report adopting the option. I think it was 4A, correct?
Okay, so do we have to make a motion on 1 and 2?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adopt the report, number 1?
I think we can make a, if I may.
The complete motion to adopt 1 and 2.
1 and 2, we can do them both at the same time. So a motion to approve items.
1 and 2.
Both?
Yes.
I second.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion,
And I second.
We have a second.
Councilmember Camacho?
yes.
Councilmember Lara?
Yes.
Councilmember Lutz?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dr. Sanchez?
Yes.
Mayor Elias?
Yes.
Motion carries.
City Manager staff reports.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. In September 2020, I formed a strategic working group to support the city's transition to a more sustainable future, one that prioritized long-term strategic planning. The working group is comprised of 7 interdepartmental staff members focused on enhancing city services and maneuvering the city through a changing policy landscape. At the beginning of my tenure, we took the important proactive steps of facilitating the strategic planning process by identifying potential short-term goals to advance these priorities. We held several council retreats to collectively develop priorities rather than individual priorities and informally adopt the following: fiscal and organizational stability, economic development, infrastructure, land use, and public safety. Over the last year, the strategic working group has been researching and strategizing for the next phase of this planning process by establishing a formal project charter, planning framework, and a draft community outreach plan. At this time, I'll hand it over to Caitlin McGee, who is the project lead for our strategic working group, and she will give a brief presentation on the process, next steps, and assembling a draft strategic plan to be adopted by council in the future. Caitlin?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Tonight I'll be giving a brief presentation on Pico Rivera's 5-year strategic plan, an overview of the progress we've made to date, and the next steps to finalize the strategic plan for formal adoption. Next slide, please. So very broadly, strategic planning is used by organizations to develop a blueprint for change. In local government, strategic planning sets the stage for improvement within the city. It is an opportunity to develop plans to meet the needs of the community and build milestones to help gauge the progress towards meeting those needs. Thank you, Gabe. The benefits of a formal strategic plan is a clear mission, vision, and value statement of the organization. It creates realistic strategies to meet goals, ensures the effective use of city resources, provides indicators to measure progress, and develops consensus on future direction of the organization. Next slide, please. So what is the role of our stakeholders? The strategic planning process should be community-based and inclusive to allow for maximum stakeholder participation. The process really begins with the community, which has a role in providing perspective on the current state of the city, offers input on the established strategic priorities, and provides recommendations on how to achieve each strategic priority. The strategic working group that Steve mentioned is responsible for facilitating the annual strategic planning process, collecting and tracking performance metrics, and developing quarterly progress reports for the community and City Council. The executive team supports the strategic working group by defining the strategic goals and actions for each of the priorities. They are responsible for planning staff capacity, allocating fiscal resources, and ensuring department action plans meet the goals of each strategic priority. And lastly, City Council is responsible for establishing high-level strategic priorities and goals, provides approval for resource allocations through the budget process, and makes policy to support the strategic priorities. So the strategic planning cycle, okay, there we go. So after several informational interviews with other cities, our strategic working group has established a strategic plan framework and planning cycle that is easily understandable and replicable year to year. The strategic plan itself is organized as a hierarchy with the mission, vision, and values at the very top. Then we have our strategic priorities, which are the long-term focus areas of the strategic plan to achieve our mission and vision. Just below that, we have our strategic goals, which are achievable mid-range aspirations, and then our strategic actions, which are the short-term tasks, programs, and tools needed to meet the strategic goals. So the strategic priorities are to be updated on a 5-year cycle. This cycle requires a robust engagement process, which includes a community needs survey. The strategic goals are updated on a 3-year cycle and require more detailed workshops with stakeholders to refine priorities, revise goals associated with each priority. And then the strategic actions are updated annually. The actions are identified by the executive team to meet the mid-range goals. So throughout the cycle, the strategic working group is responsible for tracking and reporting on performance metrics each fiscal year to inform stakeholders on the progress of attaining our strategic goals in each priority area. Next slide, please. So hopefully this simplifies it a little bit. The strategic planning process is an ongoing cycle and is closely aligned with the budget cycle. The city budget is typically adopted in June, so that's the first box there in front of you on the screen, which signals the end of our annual planning cycle, but also the beginning of our planning cycle. So starting with a city council retreat in June, we'll revisit strategic priorities, goals, and identify potential actions to consider for the year. Shortly after that, we continue the stakeholder engagement process by holding community and commission workshops to vet the identified priorities, goals, and actions. And in July, since it's kind of an ongoing cycle, that's when the strategic working group will release its first quarterly report to the community and city council. And so in September, the executive team takes the feedback from the stakeholder engagement process to formulate departmental actions and action plans to meet the priorities and goals. In October, the strategic working group begins collecting data from the previous fiscal year to update our performance metrics. We also release a second quarterly report. And then in November there, the executive team begins preparing for the mid-year budget update and a second city council, and prepare for the second city council retreat, which will be held in January by drafting initial budget allocations to support the departmental action plans. So starting at the new calendar year, we'll hold a second city council retreat. This is where the strategic working group will present the final performance metrics from the past fiscal year. And City Council will provide initial approval to the executive team on the proposed action plans. And so that way, between January and April, the executive team is really focused on finalizing the proposed budget for adoption and preparing presentations for the final adoption in June. So we start the cycle again. Next slide. Thank you. So the community survey, which we're all excited to see and roll out. So we're rolling out the community survey as part of our stakeholder engagement process. A memo was sent back in May outlining our plan, our formal plan. So the survey will serve as a valuable source of data to benchmark for our future progress. The survey will be distributed by telephone, mail, text, also with the option of being provided in Spanish. And the survey will go live August 31st with a target survey sample size of 400 residents. So this is a 95% statistically reasonable survey size. And once the survey is closed to respondents, the data will be processed and compiled into a final report, which will be presented to council in alignment with the second ARP funding study session. And so next steps, the strategic working group is going to be very busy over the next several months. September will be primarily focused on conducting our community survey, employee engagement survey. We're also conducting informational interviews with each member of the executive team to identify their priorities and challenges to really inform this first strategic plan. Then starting in October, the working group will be compiling qualitative and quantitative data to begin updating the city's mission, vision, and values, which are a key component of the strategic plan. We'll also be hosting several stakeholder workshops in the month of October to inform the final priorities, goals, and actions for the plan. And then closing out kind of our near-term steps, in January, we'll host the City Council, the second City Council retreat to review the draft document, the draft strategic plan with the revised mission, vision, and values, and the City Council will formally adopt the plan later that month. Also, in front of you, you have kind of an informal survey for City Council to help the strategic working group begin revising the city's mission, vision, and values. This was also sent to you in form of a memo about a month ago. And then we've provided it here for you today to review as well. So with that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Mr. City Manager, my 29 years of business and my 17 years of education, that makes me 85, okay? Studies show that presentations have a retention rate of 20%, okay? 20%. We have sat 3 hours in presentations here, and you know what? I feel a little guilty that I'm not able to appreciate the presentations. So I would please ask you to consider scheduling where we can appreciate, or at least I can appreciate, the presentations.
Certainly, Mayor, we can set up individual meetings if requested by council members.
New business, let's begin. Mayor Pro Tem?
Sure, I wanted to comment really quickly as well on number 13. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's ambitious cycle. In terms of the survey, I haven't got a chance to give feedback. Just glancing at it, I feel like it's a little long. And also, sometimes there's terminology that we use in the city internally that I feel the average resident wouldn't quite understand. Like, there's questions that ask, would you like mixed use? this. A resident might not know what mixed use means. So I think we could kind of simplify some of the terminology that we hear in here. So I'll give suggestions. I recommend my colleagues as well. We can review that this week and give further feedback on the survey.
So-
I think you provided that. You did email it.
Yeah, maybe I can clarify the community survey. We requested council's feedback for that back in May.
Right.
We've moved forward with those questions with a survey consultant who has kind of helped with that
Good.
concern, right? They've got
Oh,
plenty
what's
of
the survey
experience.
that says it's going to be finalized in September? That's a different survey?
So what you have in front of you with a cover sheet with the city logo, this is a informal survey of the city council. So we're asking for your responses to these specific questions to help the strategic working group begin drafting the city's mission, vision, value statements, and performance metrics. So each of those questions have a specific purpose of what it's answering.
But on your next steps, it says complete community survey, complete employee survey, informational interviews. So there's also a city council survey that goes in here.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So then you're saying that the community survey and the employee survey were already complete?
They are going to go live in about a week or two, yes.
Got it.
And those initial drafts had been sent to council for review.
Thank you. Are we on new business now? New business, I only have one item. There was an article that came out in the LA Times and also a public comment regarding drought conditions. And I wanted to see, direct staff if we could revisit this issue. I know that in the past we had limited dates, staggered dates of watering your yard, opportunities, there might be state opportunities, other opportunities for rebates for people that might want to change their yards to drought-tolerant landscape or other water-type rebates. Can we have staff, direct staff to review, revisit those, giving our pending drought conditions?
Yeah, definitely, we can take a look at that to see where we're at and what the state mandated regulations will be either now or coming forward.
Do we need a second for that one, or?
No, we can take a look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilman?
Yeah, I just want to bring up an issue regarding folks that are out there soliciting door-to-door salespeople. I know there's been, always we get complaints from residents about this door-to-door activity. I know we do have an ordinance on that. I'd like to ask Director Garcia if you can just expand on the ordinance and, what enforcement we're currently doing to deal with the solicitors in our city.
So we do have a provision for door-to-door salesmen to come in and become licensed and be able to conduct business. It is a little difficult with the solar salesmen to capture their activity. We've had difficulty not only through code enforcement with our sheriff. What we could do is look at what other cities are doing to increase fines so that when they are identified and we are able to see if we can find them something that's a little more substantial. That way it can help curtail activity.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I think we should just keep in, I know it's tough to, once to get a complaint and, priority issues but something that some residents do have an issue with having to get someone at your door knocking, to sell you something. But thank you for that. Also, just wanted to recognize, and I know it was provided to us and stated during a meeting, the California State Auditors of the City of Pico Rivera as fiscal stability. And just wanted to highlight the fact that we are a low-risk city based on state auditor, and I think that speaks volumes to the condition of our city, the policy decisions that have been made over the years that puts us in this fiscal stability. So I think something as a community should be proud of where we're at in comparison to other cities in the region. So,
Councilman Lara?
I don't have anything under new business, just old business.
Okay. Councilman Lutz?
Old business.
Okay, I have some very good news. As I think I mentioned to you before, we had a meeting with Supervisor Hilda Solis, and she indicated that she was, very supportive of us starting a Veterans Resource Center. So we had an opportunity to tour about 3 resource centers to take a look at them. And so we had a pretty good idea as to what we were looking for. We then got the opportunity of going to the Mines Library, and we found the perfect spot. The librarian directed us towards it. And again, it's a situation where I wish I had a photograph so I could show you. So we have the spot. We have the spot to develop our Veterans Resource Center right next to the monument. The only thing we have to do is that we have to now formally write a letter to the librarian, the director of libraries there, requesting that we get the space.
We'll get it going on
Okay.
that.
Do I need a second for that? Is that going to be
I think if I get some consensus from council, which I think it's there, we'll go ahead and move forward on it.
okay? So we're going to draft a letter to, okay, very good, very good. I'm also going to need a second for this because what I'd like to do is, I think it's time that we review and update our Code of Ethics manual. Do I have a second on that? Okay, thank you very much.
Could I just point one thing out on that, Mayor? This coincides if you want to get it scheduled. I know in the ethics document, it says we'll revisit every, 12 months?
Every even year, so November of 22. The code, that's written into the code, that it would be reviewed every even year in November.
So what does that mean?
So if council wants to change that, that's the request of council. If they want to move the Code of Ethics policy says every 2 years.
We're not limited. I mean, it doesn't limit, it doesn't say you can only do it on even years.
Yeah.
No. It's just if council directs it, we'll move forward on that. So.
That's what we just did.
My idea is that, we would allow the council members to bring up any items that they see that we need to add, and we could vote, on it right there and, just make the additions as we see fit. Okay? So I do have a second on that. Okay, great. I'm also going to need a second on this one because I think it's going to be an hour longer on this one. I understand we have a new staffer working on procurement policies and procedures and contract management system.
Yes, we do.
Okay. I would like a report and a statement of work and timeline on the proposed review and evaluation process for the approval of the procedures. Okay, so I'd like to see exactly what is going on. I'd like the council to be able to see what's going on there. Okay? Do I have a second on that?
Okay.
Okay, all right. Route 60 update. I had a discussion with the mayor of Montebello, and they are very willing to talk to us on developing some formal structure. Just a little background. They said that the original agreement that they had for the Route 60 was a special agreement because it's not a service area, it's all residential, in 1986, and it was a handshake. And we've been operating on a handshake, okay, without really any procedures and so on. So what we talked about was the fact of formalizing, formalizing an agreement with the city of Montebello on the use or the potential use of the route and so on, and which would actually require us, because we would have to be the prime contractor. Montebello cannot contract with the district, okay? So they would, so we would be the prime contractor. We would have to establish an agreement with the district in terms of the way that it would be operated and, who would communicate and so on. And again, they were more than willing to talk to us. And what it would require is for me, and I need the permission, of the council, to write a letter requesting that we begin communications on that, and also outlining that our Mayor Pro Tem and our Community Service Committee actually be the, be the representatives of the city. Mayor Pro Tem, is that all right with you?
Seems like we're getting, breaching a little bit in terms of the staff, the city manager's territory, I think. In conjunction with that, I know that we have the bus depot center in Pico Rivera. Is that our property that we own? And I think this is a whole jurisdiction of bus.
That's, okay, that's an interesting
Not community.
part of it, because I can answer that. That property's property of Montebello, but they are currently offering it to the city of Pico Rivera if we're willing to purchase it.
I think that's breaching a little bit of the staff territory. I would defer to staff expertise rather than a committee. Also, I will give an update in old business about the ad hoc, the community services ad hoc that we attempted. So you might get some insight in there.
Can I use you as the representatives?
I don't feel it's appropriate to be in a committee.
Okay,
I feel it would be appropriate for the city manager and the staff, that the transportation individual, to work with Montebello on this issue.
okay.
Mayor, may I add to?
Then I will proceed without the committee. Okay? So I'll go ahead and write that letter there.
May I, well, I'll wait for my.
Okay. The city of Montebello is offering relief from our golf course closure with an offer for Pico Rivera residents to golf in Pico Rivera for the, at the existing Pico Rivera discount rates. Okay? All they have to do is just show a driver's license. Okay? That's my information here. Old business?
Yes, I have an update. So regarding the community services ad hoc, Councilmember Lutz and I had a preliminary meeting with the superintendent and board, El Rancho Unified Board President. The initial conversation was going to be around the bus 60 line. However, there was some apprehension by the board member to participate in an ad hoc committee regarding their FICMAT recommendations. So initially, the meeting was scheduled for 4:30, and they did not want to, they didn't log in to call because there was a lot of apprehension around that and sensitivity. So Councilmember Lutz and I, we were able to convene a meeting just to discuss kind of the background of our community services ad hoc. And we did recommend to the superintendent, Dr. Esparza, if they could take back the information on our committees to the school board and recommend to them if, whether it be the superintendent or one or two of the council members, board members participate if they choose in our ad hoc, and they can work on their end to assign what they're comfortable with, who wants to participate in what, and we can have that dialogue with our city manager and the superintendent, because the board president, she was apprehensive to participate in the ad hoc. So we didn't get a lot of content. We just kind of got to the place of, we have this ad hoc, we want to discuss these issues with you. This is our format that we have on the city council side. We don't know what they have on their side. So it wasn't a lot of content in terms of resolving needs, strong issues, but we did have a brief conversation on about our ad hocs. So that's as far as we got with that. I did have another ad hoc meeting with staff regarding other issues, including pool updates, which we're going to have coming, a job fair in September, which the economic development director will talk about, and also a childcare We Care program, which on September 14th will have a more formal update. There was some preliminary information that they're only 20 childcare centers in Pico Rivera daycare. And we did have 2 public comments from residents that they felt they were lacking childcare. Correct me if I'm wrong, Parks Director Ugar, the REACH program is the city-operated after-school program, but that's funded by a grant. So there's restrictions and there's hours that kids must attend. And so parents seemed unhappy that they couldn't pick up their child early because it is a formal program and they have to have specific hours. So we did get some emails from residents stating that they're unhappy with the REACH program by itself, that we need other opportunities for childcare. It could be fee-for-services, and that's another industry that's growing. The childcare industries, the businesses in Pico Rivera were shut down too during the pandemic. So that's an area for future discussion, which we'll talk about on September 14th agenda. And that's it for me.
Councilman?
Yeah, just some quick old business and adding to the discussion about the bus line 60. I too had the opportunity to meet with both City Council, Mayor, and staff back on with the bus line 60 back on August 9th. I received a call from a council member. On August 10th, I received a call from the mayor, both having the conversation and finding a resolution to this. Led to a meeting on August 16th that I had with the council member and their staff, city manager, and which led to a meeting that took place actually today with both the mayor and the council member and their staff, our staff. That, as you were stating, one of the ways to find a resolution to this is to go, originally what they had proposed is to create a temporary route hybrid type and then possibly bring back line 60 back in January of 2022. I received a call last week saying that potentially based on their conversation with their staff, that was advanced to September of 2021, sorry. And to move back to resume this stuff. The discussion and the proposal was to, one, have, as you mentioned, have a letter from the city, whether it's the staff or yourself, which I think should be executed as quick as possible, but also develop an MOU between both their City Council of Montebello and the City of Pico Rivera. So I think it's something that we should move as quick as possible. So short of going into a committee, I think just you, Mayor, lead the effort and get this letter out and an MOU, and for us to discuss to determine how to get us back to that original line. One thing that is, 2 things to highlight. One, as you mentioned, the 1986 handshake. True, it wasn't handshake, but quite frankly, it seems like a good handshake. It lasted so many decades, but it's good to put something in writing. But the second is that they, to El Rancho Unified School District's credit, they developed a route, and to their transportation folks, they said, that's a really great route that they created, and I think that's one of the values that came out of it, and maybe the potential of that route to maybe become permanent as for students only, because bus line 60 runs down Passons, north-south, but it can't be dedicated for students. It can't be steady based on funding. So I think, one, expanding on that, bringing it back to what it was, but also maybe Arancho keeps that route that they created. So I think something we should do as quick as possible. So.
Councilman?
I'm going to ask that staff prepare a memo regarding this item. I feel that we've just been in the dark, really. And in that memo, I'd like to know when the city of Montebello initially reached out to the city of Pico Rivera to notify us that Route 60 was going to be suspended. Because the council members and school board members that I've talked to, they found out 2 weeks ago. This was placed on their lap. But in reality, this issue's been going on much longer. And I feel that we've been really unprepared regarding this issue. I appreciate the efforts by Councilmember Camacho and Mayor Elias in trying to get a workaround. But in my opinion, our staff has really been absent from this whole process. And so I'd like a memo detailing communication, what type of meetings were set up, who went to those meetings, how did their staff, because I'm hearing that, I'll just get stop there.
The memo's in your
It's
inbox.
our inbox.
Okay.
It's 7:10
Then-
PM
then-
today.
then I'll- What time?
7:10 PM.
7:10 PM today?
You can read it tonight when you get.
Well, thank you, you read my mind.
When you read it, it'll be more clear, and I think you will appreciate staff's involvement in that.
Great, but, there's some things I want to say, but I'm not going to say. There's a reason why this is being led by council members, and I want to thank them for that. Old business, can we get an update regarding Rosemead and Beverly?
Yes.
Excuse me?
Terry?
Rosemead and Beverly, just the construction work.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I can answer some specific questions. I'm being here for a week. I have gone out and visited it, but is there something in particular? The construction is still on its schedule. Nothing's changed, at least recently. I met with the property owners, not all property owners. I met with the property owner at the corner who isn't the spokesman for the property owners, but often relates the concerns of the property owners to the city. I met with him out there last Thursday, along with our construction manager and our engineer. I also met with a resident who lived on the opposite corner that has a dust problem. So I've been trying to get involved in that project to make sure things are moving forward. We did change the phasing of the construction staging around a little bit to accommodate some grade differentials in the pavement. If there's anything more specific than that, I could look into it, or.
Do you still foresee this project being completed by October?
Yes, our engineers have told me that, and the construction managers told me there'd be no change in the completion date.
Okay, great, thanks. One other item, we were supposed to have this on the agenda. We talked about this last council meeting regarding Rosemead Boulevard and Mr. Sanchez's issue. Can we please, I know we talked about that before the council meeting, but I want to make this official so we move on that project.
Sure, I met with, also the same day, I met with Mr. Sanchez who's on Rosemead, just north of the project, the intersection we just spoke of, and looked at the trench in which he's been expressing concerns about. And as many of you know, if you've been out there, the trench has got a kind of an asphalt hump to it. And that trench is going to be replaced and repaired in its permanent fashion in our sidewalk project, which is out to bid now. But that will take a couple of months for that to happen. So I've been recommending to the city manager, I've recommended the city manager that we take a grinding machine out and grind the hump off the pavement, if you will, in that trench to alleviate, at least for the short term, the trucks that when they come down Rosemead southerly, of course, they're coming pretty fast, and when they hit that, it creates quite a vibration and quite a shake, and you can also hear it, especially the empty trucks. You can really hear the trucks rattle when they hit that trench. So we're trying to get out there this week, and if we can't, we'll get out there next week to grind that trench, and then permanently fix it in the sidewalk project.
City manager, do you need any formal action by city council to make sure that that gets done within the next few weeks?
No.
Okay, thank you. Could you please report back to us at the next city council meeting?
Yes, sir.
Progress, great, thank you.
Do you want to agendize that?
No, I don't think, I think there's a path. I think there's a reasonable time frame. That's okay. We'll remember.
And if I may add, and you're right, we don't need to agendize this, just in your presentation as also discussed the bigger project that has been delayed because we're looking at the mediums, which is good. But then there was some conversation about potentially being sooner than later. But with the impact of Rosemead and Beverly, we need to do that project, but we also, we can't stress that area so much as you develop projects back to back. So if you could just give us a little bit of update on that as well.
I'll do that.
Project along Rosemead Boulevard as well.
I will.
That'd be great, thank you.
I'm sure Mr. Sanchez will remind us.
Councilman, old business?
Thank you, Mayor. I can't recall if in the last meeting I discussed in in old business or new business, but Rio Hondo Park now has safety cameras, a total of 18 safety cameras. So Director Ugar, that project is nearly finished. Those safety programs with loudspeakers protect the park goers from any potential crime to occur. And I think what we only need now is just those posted signs that there are safety cameras in the park protecting the community. If you can elaborate on that, I'm proud and happy that we started that pilot project there. Thank you, Mr. City Manager, for that. And if you can expand.
Great,
Director Ugar.
absolutely. Yeah, we're almost done with the project, so we don't have just, all the cameras are in. And we've been working with Lieutenant Hutak. It's been really fantastic. And we've already caught some activity, with drinking in the park. So it's been really successful for us already in the last 2 weeks. The other thing is that we don't have the microphones up just yet because we are bidding out our telephone system. And the microphones are connected to the telephone system. So everything's up right now except for those microphones. And as soon as we get the telephone systems up, those will be up.
Fantastic.
So what we're doing is we plan to have a grand opening celebration, like a ribbon cutting. And that
Yes.
will be, right now it's scheduled, I looked at your calendars with Sandra Castro, and it's scheduled, I believe, the last Thursday before Halloween. So I think it's Thursday, October 28th, if I can remember.
Okay.
And we'll do a ribbon cutting out there and celebrate and kind of advocate. I thought it would be nice for you to advocate for the safety committee, like be safe before Halloween and
Yes.
those types of things with the time changing. And then Lieutenant Hutak will, of course, lead the charge on that.
That'd be great if Lieutenant Hutak can do a PSA, a public service
Yes.
announcement for us.
I know I just threw that at you. Sorry, I just kind of assumed that you might. Okay.
She's great at those public service announcements.
You both are. It's good. Yeah, you're a good duo.
And the second item I wanted to ask Director Michael Garcia, the Silent Second program that we're bringing forth this 2021 year, how soon are we from starting that? And again, that Silent Second program allows homeowners to renovate their homes, exterior and interior, with loans that don't have to be paid back until they refinance or sell. And I guess it's all comes around with the beautification of our city.
So I'm glad we've been working with Neighborhood Housing Services of LA County. Good group. We need to get back on our schedule of meeting on a weekly basis. There's some contract documents that they need to provide to us that we will then submit to our representatives at HUD. But I'm hoping we should have it done, that they give us the okay. There was some holdup on whether they were going to move forward with our community. On that program, we're still going to work with them on other items. We're looking at a few properties that we think that they could work on, and they're bringing in some private funding as well to provide rehabilitation programs to our communities. So I was just realizing that was we had that on our calendars, and it stopped after 4 months, so.
So by end of year, we should have this up and rolling.
That's the hope, yes.
Great, okay. Thank you. Mayor, that's it for me.
This is old business, and this is concerning the deputy that the district had asked to share. Lieutenant, are you aware of that? That the district wanted a deputy part-time at the school here?
The school resource deputy? Yes, I don't know where the discussion is at in that.
Okay, great. Because again, what I need to ask you, have they reached out to you to try to talk to you?
No, there hasn't been any communication since the joint meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Mayor, that reminded me, going along with the conversation that Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, that we made our first meeting, community service committee. We extended the olive branch, so to speak. And so we hope that we'll schedule a meeting so that we meet all protocols, where we have 2 representatives from the council and 2 representatives from the school board, so that we can comply with any laws of the state of California. And once that gets up and rolling, again, we'd love to extend help as a city to the school board, because one cannot exist without the other. We want an excellent educational system with high educational standards and eventually with great buildings. And we also want a city with high quality buildings and high safety standards. Together will be great. And so I figure in about a month or two, we expect that the school board will reach out to us, schedule a date, and we can help each other out. And that is our intent.
Okay. I guess one of the questions was, if they're recognized as law enforcement, individuals on the campuses.
I was briefly given some information where the actual school board has their own law enforcement official. And I think that would be a great opportunity, Mayor Pro Tem, where we discuss where the responsibilities of the law enforcement official that the school board has on campuses ends, and where they then need the assistance of our sheriff's department to help out on special circumstances, because I would imagine it's not feasible to have a sheriff full-time, all the time, for every minor incident. I think that would be logically the responsibility of a deputy, not a deputy, but a police officer from the school board. So those items would need to be discussed in detail.
We do have a community resources officer. I know in prior years, the history, there was a partially paid deputy that our city paid for and joint with El Rancho. And the prior school board made the decision that they did not want the LA County Sheriff's deputy on the campus. So they now fund a community resources, so to speak, person. And so I think that would be the jurisdiction of the school board to decide if they want the sheriffs or not for us to decide. So I think that's within their jurisdiction.
That's it with old business. How about intergovernmental agency meetings? Mayor Pro Tem?
None at this point.
Nothing? Council? Report? No meetings?
No, but I would just like to, thoughts and prayers for Public Works employee Peter Nunez. He's pretty ill, so that's it.
Mr. Nunez? Can you repeat that so everyone understands this?
Yeah, just thoughts to Public Works employee Peter Nunez, who was sick this week. It's just good to keep him in your thoughts.
How's he doing?
He's doing okay. I haven't had a chance to check on him. It's been pretty crazy at work.
He's at Presbyterian?
He was. I'm not sure if he's still there.
Okay. Mr. City Manager, is there anything that we can do to express our support?
Yeah, I think the family established individually, they established a GoFundMe page, and so, that has been circulated, and, it's up to each person who receives it to participate.
Okay.
We're also keeping them in our prayers.
Councilman Lutz?
None, Mayor.
Okay, no meetings? Council, closed session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, we have one item under public employee evaluation.